Hey guys, tonight we're wandering through the squelchy, chaotic wonderland of a 14th century English fair. Yes, with your muddy boots on and a half-chewed honey fritter in hand. You can hear the clatter of wooden wheels, the occasional bray of an overworked donkey, and that strange man trying to rhyme eel with deal while waving a skewer at your face. Picture it, colourful banners flutter. Overhead, stalls creak under heaps of bread and questionable meat, and a child is loudly crying because someone stole his cheese onion pasty. The smell, equal parts inviting and alarming. Roasting fat, trampled herbs, and the pungent perfume of thousands of unwashed feet. It's immersive, it's loud, and you, dear traveller, are starving. You probably won't survive this without indigestion, mild heat stroke, or a minor bout of plague. But hey, worth it for a taste of that honeyed oat ball wrapped in cabbage, right? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And of course, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing who's drifting off with medieval snack law in Mumbai or Minneapolis. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're just past the outer edge of the fairgrounds now, boots squishing in damp grass trying not to trip over a sprawled out minstrel who drank too much dandelion wine. The sound of bells clanging, jingling, always slightly offbeat, draws you toward the main thoroughfare. That's where the real action happens. Stalls line the mud-packed lanes, hawkers shout over one another, and a small dog with a turnip in its mouth scampers by like it owns the place. You pass a woman selling garlands of herbs, mostly pennyroyal and tansy allegedly for mood, but probably just to mask the fair's rich aroma of cooked fat and human crowd. A boy tugs at your sleeve, trying to get you to try buttered apple bits, which are exactly what they sound like. Wedges of apple boiled, tossed in butter, and probably seasoned with hope. You pause in front of a stall made entirely of wicker and imagination, where a man with 3 teeth is deep frying something that looks like a frog, but smells like onions. You ask what it is. He tells you it's fair food, then winks, which doesn't really help. Historians still argue whether this sort of outdoor eating really resembled modern street food, or if most of it was brought in bulk from household kitchens. What's more likely is a bit of both. Larger fairgoers read wealthier visitors brought their own delicacies, but peasants and townsfolk, they bought whatever was hot cheap and on a stick. The crowd thickens as you pass a juggler with surprisingly greasy hands and a puppet show depicting King Edward III defeating the French with a particularly large cheese. You spot a girl licking what looks like a flatbread, but is actually a sugar leaf, a thin, hardened honey, wafer spiced with ginger and saffron, rare as hen's teeth unless the monastery had a good week. A surprising amount of the fair is centred around food. Yes, there are games, falconry sermons, and the occasional impromptu marriage proposal under the influence of cherry wine, but most people came to eat things they couldn't afford the rest of the year. Fairs were a glorious exception to the dietary monotony of peasant life. For 1 day or 3, if the bishop was feeling generous, you could bite into something exotic, like almond paste, or dried citrus peel, or fried leeks wrapped in more leeks. You inch toward a stall blazing with heat from a brick oven, its edges blackened from years of crust and cheese spillover. This one is fancy. The sign claims they're selling London-style pies, which just means the filling might actually be meat. You watch as a man slices into a golden pastry steam, wafting out in a cloud that smells of sage onion, and something slightly metallic. You ask what's inside. He replies mostly pigeon, some other things. Some scholars believe these fairs were where many regional snacks were invented, not by chefs but by desperate vendors trying to sell off leftovers before they rotted. That's how you end up with, say, a porridge fritter. Take yesterday's pottage, let it cool, shape it like a meatball, and deep fry it in mutton fat. Crunchy. Slightly tragic. Weirdly good with ale. Your stomach rumbles. You realise you've been so busy gawking that you haven't eaten anything yet. A girl in a patched linen apron hands you something wrapped in dock leaves. Inside, a warm nutty oat cake sweetened with old honey and wild thyme. You take a bite. It's dense. It's chewy. You're not sure if it's dessert or survival food, but it's delicious. Around you, food changes hands constantly. A couple argues over whether their egg tart actually contains eggs. A priest barters 3 beads for a handful of sugared nuts. A nobleman's servant tosses a crumb to a duck. The duck ignores him. Fair politics. Your eyes catch on a strange wooden wheel beside a cart, a cheese turner. Allegedly, turning the wheel lets you sample different aged cheeses. You give it a spin. It lands on something waxy and grey. You decline. The sun dips slightly lower. A lute player begins a slow, sweet tune about a man who lost his trousers in a barley field. Everyone claps along, still chewing. The air smells now of baked pears and hope. And then there it is. The eel cart. No fear. Yeah, is complete without the eel cart. You shuffle closer to the eel cart, partly out of curiosity, partly because the wind has changed direction. And now everything smells faintly like river. The cart itself is nothing fancy. Wooden wheels, sagging canvas roof, and a hand-painted sign that reads, Fresh Wigglers, sort of. Beneath the flap, a broad-faced man with a leather apron and suspiciously nimble fingers is laying out rows of glistening coiled eel on a slate slab. The eels have been split-boned, brined, then pan-fried over a smoky charcoal pit. They're dark, shiny and slightly sticky, curled into tight spirals like edible question marks. He serves them cold with a dash of something he calls marsh salt, likely harvested from the tidal flats, and potentially flavoured with dreams and pondweed. As you accept a small wooden skewer with a bite-sized chunk of eel on the end, he winks, and says, best not ask what they were fed. You nod politely, take a bite, and realise it's actually okay. A little oily, a little chewy but flavoured with vinegar, ground coriander, and something vaguely sweet, maybe dried currants. Historians still argue whether eels were considered a delicacy or just convenient protein. Some say they were peasant food. Others insist monks raised them in monastic ponds as a Friday fish alternative. What's not up for debate, the sheer quantity eaten. London's Thames River alone provided hundreds of thousands each year. People loved eels. People feared eels. People wore eel skin as shoe liners. That part's less appetising. You wander past a cluster of stalls where things are being dipped in batter and hurled into cauldrons of boiling fat. The scent is glorious. Welcome to Fritter Alley. A wiry woman with a voice like gravel offers you something she calls apple puffs. These are just chopped apples coated in flour, dipped in ale batter, and fried until golden. She drizzles them with honey and sprinkles on powdered ginger. It's shockingly delicious. Shockingly, you nod enthusiastically, mouth full, and she rewards you with a bonus puff that may or may not contain a raisin. Next door, a teenage boy stands behind a pile of what look like fried lumps of turnip. He calls them golden moons. You ask what's in them. He shrugs. Mostly turnip. A little mustard seed. Some goose fat. You try one. It's earthy, crispy, and strangely satisfying. There's a kind of alchemy to medieval fare snacks. The food isn't about presentation. It's about transformation, making the bland exciting, the poor rich, the same old ingredients taste new. Deep frying plays a big role in that. Not every home had the fuel or equipment for that kind of cooking, so fried food, at a fare felt indulgent, rare, almost luxurious. And then there are the mystery fritters. One woman offers you what she claims is a herbal pocket. It's greenish crunchy and tastes vaguely of mint and garlic. Another stall brags about its hedgehog bites. You quickly learn this does not mean actual hedgehog, thank goodness, but rather a kind of spiced lentil fritter, shaped like one with clove spikes baked in. Cute, terrifying, tasty. You see a man walk by eating what looks like a deep-fried feather. He grins at your confusion and explains pigeon wing. No meat, just crunch. You make a mental note to maybe not try that one. Nearby, 2 children argue over a skewer of deep-fried bread crusts dusted in sweet root powder. It's probably parsnip or possibly something less identifiable. Their mother ignores them, busy haggling for a pouch of fried garden weeds, dandelion leaves, nettles, and sorrel, bundled battered and crisped to oblivion. In one corner, a couple sits sharing a fried cheese ball the size of a baby's fist. You learn it's made from sheep's milk curd, rolled in flour, and fried until the outside hardens like armour. They crack it open like a boiled egg, revealing gooey, sour-smelling cheese inside. One of them gags. The other shrugs and keeps eating. Romance. This section of the fair is noisy, chaotic, and deeply satisfying. It's a sensory overload in the best way, spitting oil, burping, merrymakers laughing. Children with grease-slicked fingers. You lose track of time nibbling fritters and watching a man try to juggle flaming torches while standing on a barrel. And then someone hands you a crackle cake. No, not cake. More like a cracker. Hard as old boots, flavoured with lard and herbs, and allegedly designed to soak up ale. You nibble cautiously and immediately feel parched. It works. A drummer walks by, beating a slow, steady rhythm that makes the pigeons scatter, and the fried eelman nod along solemnly. Behind you, a dog howls possibly in response to the crackle cake. There's one final fritter you're encouraged to try the festival finger. It's a long, tube-shaped pastry hollow, inside filled with mashed dates and spiced breadcrumbs, then dipped in oil and flash-fried. You take a bite and realise it's not just good, it's excellent. Sweet, crunchy, faintly floral, and somehow comforting. You imagine it being handed to a tired child at dusk, a little reward for enduring the chaos. A portable hug. This was the heart of fair-eating portability indulgence, and just enough danger. The oil was rarely changed. The batter might contain almost anything, and the seasoning. Well, let's just say consistency wasn't medieval England's strong suit, but you didn't come here for precision. You came for fried mystery and fleeting joy. As you lick honey from your fingers and watch a man try and fail to fry a plum whole, you realise something. These aren't just snacks. They're miniature festivals, each one wrapped in cloth, stick or leaf. And even if you don't know exactly what you're eating for now, it's enough that it's warm, filling and shared. You're starting to notice a pattern. For every stall promising something savoury and salty, there's another offering. The sticky, the sweet, and the teeth-breaking. Welcome to the sweeter side of the fair. The realm of honey, dried fruit, and vague attempts at candy. Sugar in the 14th century. Forget about it, unless you were royalty or extremely well connected with a Venetian trader you weren't getting your hands on the white stuff. But honey was everywhere. Local beekeepers, monasteries, and even foragers kept the golden goo flowing into every conceivable foodstuff. It was the medieval duct tape of flavour. The first thing that catches your eye is a display of glittering, misshapen lumps labelled honeystones. They're just cooled globs of boiled honey rolled in crushed herbs or flower petals. Some are dark, thick and sharp tasting with horehound or sage. Others are milder flecked with rose or lavender. A young girl with sticky fingers tells you she likes to suck on one until her mum stops talking. Fair enough. Next comes a stack of almond wafers that look suspiciously like modern fortune cookies, minus the fortune, and well the structural integrity. They're thin curved and slightly chewy, made from ground almonds, honey and egg white. You try one. It tastes like a mix between a granola bar and a candle. Somehow, not unpleasant. Historians still argue whether these kinds of treats were made primarily for fairs or borrowed from convent kitchens, where nuns experimented with honey and almond paste as part of their more pious dessert programs. Some say these snacks were medicinal. Others say they were just what happened when monks got bored and had too many bees. A large man with a waxed moustache offers you a ginger chew, which turns out to be a piece of dried ginger root, candied in honey and rolled in pepper. It burns all the way down your throat, but somehow makes your ears tingle in a not bad way. You pass a stand hawking something called cider jelly. The vendor explains that it's made by boiling apple cider down with cloves until it thickens into a sticky slab, then cutting it into squares. It's somewhere between candy and fruit leather, and you watch as a pair of children argue over who got the bigger piece before accidentally dropping both into the mud. Next up is the nut twist. This is a shortbread style roll studded with hazelnuts and lightly glazed with what else honey. It's rich, surprisingly complex, and would be perfect with tea if such a thing existed here. Instead, you get a warm mug of mead passed to you by a smiling woman who claims it's so sweet it'll rot your regrets. You wander further down the fairgrounds and spot a man carrying a tray on a neck strap, like a medieval cigarette girl. He's selling sugar almonds, but you know better by now. These are just roasted almonds dipped in honey and rolled in something vaguely crunchy, possibly old breadcrumbs, possibly powdered gingerbread. You buy a handful anyway and crunch them noisily as you walk. The afternoon light is beginning to soften the sun, casting gold across the fair like nature's filter. You step over a boy who's asleep next to a pear tart and follow the scent of stewed fruit to a low tent with garlands of dried apple slices strung like festival lights. Inside the vendor is stirring something in a large iron pot. It's a pear and quince compote, thickened with ground hazelnut and sweetened with, you guessed it, honey. She serves it in small wooden bowls with a dab of clotted cream if you're feeling fancy. You take one. It's warm, fragrant, and oddly comforting, like someone boiled autumn into a memory. You eat slowly, watching a juggler drop all 3 of his cabbages. A group of young men are laughing nearby, each holding a date ball, a dense treat made from mashed dates, breadcrumbs, herbs, and more honey. They're slightly sticky and designed to be thrown at your friends if you have any left over. You're told they harden by evening and can be used as weapons. Versatility. A girl runs by offering fig fingers. These are just chopped dried figs rolled into strips, then wrapped in a thin leaf and tied with a string. Portable, chewy, and not too sweet, they were probably more of a practical energy food than dessert. You take one nibble it thoughtfully and decide it tastes like a raisin got lost in a hedge maze. In the distance, someone is shouting about candied carrots, but you can't quite bring yourself to find out what that means. Instead, you follow the aroma of something smoky and warm, leading to a stall where a large, stern-looking woman is roasting apples over open coals, basting them with mead as they cook. She calls them sleepy apples, says they help with dreams, and charges you half a penny. You bite in. It's soft, caramelised tangy at the edges and sweet at the centre. The skin's slightly burned, which only adds to the charm. You're not sure if it'll help with dreams, but it's the first thing you've eaten that makes you want to curl up on a hay bale and just doze. And that's when someone offers you the strangest thing, yet a candied parsley root. It's sliced thin, boiled in wine and honey, then left to dry in the sun. It crackles between your teeth like old leaves and tastes faintly like licorice and regret. You pretend to like it. The vendor beams. This entire stretch of the fair has felt like a dessert aisle designed by someone who's never had dessert. And yet, despite the odd flavours and textures, there's something deeply satisfying about it all. It's food as festival, food as ritual, food as fleeting sweetness in a rough, muddy world. As you wipe your fingers on your cloak and glance at the darkening sky, you wonder what the next corner will bring. Maybe meat on sticks. Maybe a man selling boiled peas out of a boot. Who knows, but one thing's certain, you've never been so full on so little sugar. You follow the sound of rhythmic thumping, wood against wood, maybe someone hacking at a ham shank with a slightly too small knife. The scent shifts again. Gone are the florals and spice sweets of the honey tents. Here it's meat. Rich, salty, aggressively aromatic meat. You've arrived at the part of the fair where protein reigns. The first thing you see is a table lined with skewers, some short, some absurdly long, jammed with what looks like roasted bits of something. A boy with a soot-smeared face shouts, "Pig knuckles, lamb cheeks, goat tongues," as if each is a triumph. A group of labourers stand nearby, gnawing on their respective trophies, like medieval corn dogs. You choose something labelled pork ball, handed to you on a splintery stick. It's roughly the size of a small egg, golden brown, and smells like cloves. You take a bite. The inside is more bread than meat, some sort of minced pork, mixed with stale breadcrumbs, herbs and onion. It's chewy, but it works. It fills the space in your belly that honey left empty. Nearby, a vendor flips what he claims are venison patties on a flat iron pan over flame. They're flattened discs of wild meat, spiced heavily to hide the fact that it's probably not all venison. Historians still argue whether most fair meat was fresh or cleverly disguised leftovers. The seasoning sage marjoram vinegar, and sometimes even a dash of ale, masked a lot. And yes, there are pies. So many pies. Stacked high, their crusts blackened at the edges, puffing steam through tiny holes at the top like culinary chimneys. One is labelled duck and leek, another kidney and currant. You're offered a shepherd's surprise. You ask what's in it. The cook shrugs and says, bit of this, bit of that. Maybe sheep, maybe turnip. You take one. It's mostly gravy, glorious, greasy, peppery gravy. A man slices a pie with theatrical flair, revealing a bright yellow filling. Eggs, he says. 8 of them, with herbs and milk. It's a fair pie. You wonder if your stomach can handle dairy and medieval poultry in one go, but the crowd's enthusiasm is convincing. You try a sliver. It's rich, a little runny, and surprisingly light. Like a quiche that went to a sword fight. One corner of the meat zone features drying racks of jerky dark strips of beef boar and possibly horse. They hang like medieval laundry, some twisted into braids, others coiled in spirals. They're chewy, salty and aggressively smoky. You buy a small piece of ox ribbon and chew like it's medieval gum. It tastes like pepperwood and thyme. Then there's the sausage tent. It's warm, damp, and filled with steam and mystery. Fat links of meat sizzle in pans, while thinner strings are looped like garlands across the stall. You overhear a vendor arguing with a customer over whether his boar bite sausage contains any actual boar. The answer is unclear, but the sample tastes sharp with vinegar and mustard seed, and has a texture somewhere between meatloaf and resilience. You're handed a slice of what looks like pate on a piece of stale rye bread. Pressed meatloaf, the vendor declares proudly. Stuffed with offal herbs and hope. You laugh. He doesn't. Amid the meat madness, one stall stands apart. It's quieter, darker, with thick smoke pouring from a deep-set clay oven. A man inside is roasting something wrapped in leaves, slowly, methodically. You catch a glimpse quail, maybe stuffed with wild garlic and figs. He slices one open, revealing tender meat and a pungent aroma that nearly knocks you off your feet. He charges triple the usual rate. You pay it. Historians debate how common this kind of game was among fairgoers. Some argue it was reserved for nobles, but fairs with their influx of traders and hunters were equalisers. You might not eat roast quail in your cottage, but here, for a silver penny, anything's possible. You spot a child with something in his hand, circular, brown, crackling. It's a meat chip, a thin slice of salted pork fried until crisp. He bites into it like a biscuit, grinning. His teeth are probably ruined, but his soul is happy. In one corner there's a barrel of meat scraps being stewed in a portable cauldron. It's labelled offal hash. You consider it, but a nearby vendor offers you something less intimidating. A small roll of suet dough filled with beef, dripping parsley, and minced onions. It's served warm, soft, and tastes like an apology for all the chewing you've done. And finally, you're offered what might be the most famous of all fair meat snacks, the hand pie. Small enough to hold in one palm, wrapped in thick crust, filled with whatever the vendor had that morning. Yours contains goose leeks and dried berries. It's tangy, juicy, and manages to stay warm as you wander into the next aisle. By now, the scent of fried things has faded into your cloak. You feel heavier, fuller, and mildly carnivorous. The fair keeps going, but your pace slows. A jester cartwheels by with a sausage in each hand. No one questions it. As the sun slips further down, you glance back once more at the meat zone, still bustling, still sizzling, still offering the eternal gamble. Is it pork? Is it pigeon? Does it matter? Not tonight. You're here to snack. The crowd shifts again, and so do the smells, less of singed meat and spiced dripping, more of something earthier, thicker, and oddly nostalgic. You follow your nose down a side lane, past a man selling candle stubs and a woman hawking bad poetry, and find yourself in front of a long trestle table loaded with what appears to be bowls of stew. Lots of them. All different colours, textures, and levels of suspicious steam. Welcome to the world of pottage to go. Yes, fair pottage. Street stew. The kind of meal that clings to your ribs and possibly your tunic. A portly woman in a grease-spattered gown stirs a pot with a spoon that looks suspiciously like a gardening tool. You look thin, she says. You aren't, but that's part of the sales pitch. She ladles a generous portion of something brown and lumpy into a hollowed-out bread roll and hands it to you without ceremony. The bread is thick, stale enough to act as both bowl and chew toy. The pottage itself, warm, deeply savoury, and laced with barley root vegetables and something vaguely mutton adjacent. You take a bite and immediately feel comforted, if not entirely reassured. Historians still argue whether pottage at fairs was pre-made at home or cooked on site. The answer, like the stew, is probably a mix of both. Some vendors arrived with cauldrons of leftovers. Others threw in whatever they could find that morning. Either way, it was hot, heavy, and wonderfully anonymous. You never quite knew what was in it, and that was part of the charm. You sidestep a child balancing a dripping bread bowl twice the size of his head, and make your way to another stall, offering a more upscale Take Lord's pottage. It's richer with raisins, minced pork parsley, and traces of nutmeg. You detect a faint lemony tang and realise they've added sorrel. It's actually fantastic. Even the bread bowl is softer, clearly made from a fresher batch. Another variation comes your way fish pottage. It smells like the sea fermented beans and ambition. You take a spoonful and find it's loaded with flaked herring, ground oats, and wild fennel. A bit sharp, but hearty. The kind of thing you'd eat before walking to the next village in the rain. Which, to be fair, is most of medieval life. You pause beside a man sitting cross-legged beside a low fire, gently simmering a copper pot on coals. His version, poor man's broth, he says. No meat, just greens, leeks, bits of turnip, and a lot of onion. It's watery but fragrant. He offers a taste, and you take a cautious sip. It's light, but oddly good, the kind of thing you'd crave after 5 hours of meat pies and candied roots. Then comes the innovation pottage dumplings. A cheerful girl in a felt cap is scooping thick stew into balls of dough, folding them closed like medieval pierogi, and tossing them into a pan for a quick fry. You buy two. One contains beef and carrots, the other raisins and leeks. Unexpected, slightly confusing, still somehow worth it. You hear a vendor yelling about stew boats. Intrigued, you follow the sound and discover small troughs of hard biscuit, twice-baked barley bread, hollowed out to hold a scoop of lentil mash, then baked again for crunch. It won't leak, she swears. It kind of does. Still, the concept is solid. One cart specialises in something called thick brew. This is more of a beverage, less of a stew, but it blurs the line so convincingly it deserves a mention. It's a thin, drinkable porridge made from ale, oats, honey, and sometimes egg yolk, like sipping breakfast lunch and a mild hangover all at once. Another innovation, portable stew skewers. Chunks of boiled root vegetables, dried pork, and lumps of congealed barley mash impaled on wooden sticks. You take one and instantly regret it. It tastes fine, but the texture is medieval. You pass the rest to a goat tied nearby. The goat declines. Among the bubbling pots and steaming bowls, there's also a stall offering bread and drip, a no-frills snack involving stale bread dipped directly into the top layer of a pottage pot. Essentially, the fat skim seasoned unintentionally by fire smoke and ash. It's salty, crumbly, and weirdly addictive. You mop up the corner of someone else's stew and feel instantly more medieval. Nearby, a child hawks pottage packets wrapped in cabbage leaves. These are cold, pocket-sized slabs of yesterday's stew, thick enough to hold shape, sold for the road. You buy one. It's oddly refreshing, like a medieval granola bar with meat and no sweetness, a traveller's dream. And then a final surprise dessert pottage. Yes, really. A nun from a nearby convent offers small bowls of warm oat pudding, sweetened with dried apples, honey, and almond milk. It's soothing soft, and tastes like a bedtime lullaby. You close your eyes and hum contentedly briefly, forgetting that you're standing in a fairground, surrounded by shouting merchants and angry ducks. So much of fair food you realise isn't about flavour, it's about comfort. These stews, dumplings, and edible bowls all serve one noble purpose to keep you going, to fill the belly and warm the hands, to buy you time until the next meal, or at least the next snack on a stick. As you polish off the last of your cabbage-wrapped barley lump, and toss the leaf to a passing goat, which accepts finally, you feel fortified. Not enlightened, not energised, but full in that content sleepy way only a proper bowl of lumpy stew can deliver. You've barely wiped the last bit of barley stew residue from your fingers when a fresh gust of wind wafts a new smell. Your way, warm, yeasty and deeply comforting, like the inside of a tavern right after Mass. You follow it instinctively like a pie chart, with legs weaving through a crowd of jugglers, beggars, and one man aggressively selling spoons. And there it is, the Brew Boys' Alley, where the unmistakable clink of wooden mugs and the soft slosh of sloshing slosh, otherwise known as ale, promises comfort to the thirsty and bread to the hungry. You approach a long plank of a table behind which two young men are pouring frothy brown ale into carved mugs that look suspiciously like someone's woodworking homework. One for your mouth, one for your hand. One of them says, sliding a mug in your direction and tossing you a squat little loaf of bread. Chew bread, he explains. Soaks up the sins. You take a sip of the ale first. It's warm, foamy, bitter, and vaguely nutty, brewed with barley bog, myrtle, and possibly wildflower tears. You've never tasted anything quite like it, and yet it feels strangely familiar. This isn't beer as you know it. It's liquid bread, medieval hydration, and breakfast all rolled into one slurp. Historians still argue whether ales served at fairs were brewed specially, or just ladled in from local taverns. But what's clear is that every good vendor had a house loaf to match. And this one, it's dense dark and slightly sour. Made with the leftover mash, your server says. We bake it on stones. Keeps your teeth honest. You bite into the chew bread. It's tough, your jaw does most of the work, but it has a rich, almost nutty flavour laced with caraway, and what you think might be fennel seeds. The crust could double as a helmet, and the inside is moist in a way that implies both freshness and faint, existential dread. Still, you eat it gratefully. To your left, a girl is hawking ale cakes, which look like squat pancakes, but are made from dried malt grains, honey, and a dash of leftover beer. They're soft, slightly spongy, and come wrapped in fig leaves to keep them from drying out. You buy one. It tastes like breakfast's strange cousin, part sweet, part savoury, entirely satisfying. Further down, a hunched man, with a gleam in his eye, sells balm rolls, small airy buns made from the foam skimmed off fermenting ale. He insists they're blessed by the bubbles. You try one. It's light tangy and has that peculiar sourness that comes with slow fermentation. It pairs surprisingly well with your second mug of ale. Someone nearby sings an off-key drinking song about a monk of goose and a barrel of mead. No one knows the verses, but they all shout the last word of each line. Goose, it's infectious. You hum along. Then comes a new offering. Malted grain patties, flat discs of mashed barley, oats and dried cherries, baked over open flame and brushed with ale foam before serving. You bite in and are greeted by a chewy, slightly smoky texture that sticks pleasantly to your teeth. The next stall goes even more rustic. A pale-haired woman in a green cloak offers drinking bread, which is basically a dry biscuit meant to be dunked directly into ale. She demonstrates. You follow suit. The bread softens just enough to avoid cracking a molar and takes on the ale's flavour like a soggy sponge of joy. At the end of the row, you discover something truly niche ale porridge. It's warm, gloppy, and made from oats cooked directly in ale, sweetened with mashed apples and a pinch of salt, served in a hollowed-out turnip naturally. It's bizarre but not bad. The kind of thing you'd eat when you've lost your taste buds but not your soul. A scholarly-looking man next to you argues that this recipe dates back to the Anglo-Saxon period. His friend insists it's fair trash. Historians still debate the exact origins of ale porridge, but most agree it was common among labourers who needed both calories and hydration in one bowl. You just nod, mouth full of turnip and optimism. And then there's spent grain flatbread, a no-frills disc made from what's left after brewing grain, husks mash, and the odd hop seed mixed with flour and water, then roasted on a hot stone. It tastes like hard work and faint bitterness, but you don't mind. The chew is satisfying, and the aftertaste reminds you of campfires and compromise. To your right, a small boy is selling what he claims are barley buttons, tiny round biscuits made from milled ale grains, and honey hardened into little nibble-sized discs. They're dry, crunchy, and clearly meant for snacking over time. The boy recommends sucking on them during sermons. Stops the yawns, he says seriously. You find yourself returning to the chew bread, tearing off another piece, and dunking it in your ale, which is now lukewarm but still comforting. A nearby goose honks loudly, possibly in protest or admiration. Hard to say. One final treat comes your way, a wedge of ale cheese. Yes, it's real. Made by mixing curdled milk with a little leftover ale to give it a sour, tangy bite. It's soft, spreadable, and served on a plank of bark with a lump of dark bread. You taste it. It's odd, yeasty, but somehow right. Like the fare itself, strange, loud, unrefined, but full of character. Your head spins slightly from the ale, Or maybe it's just the rhythm of the fare, the music, the food, the smells, all folding together in a sleepy swirl of satisfaction. You sit down on an overturned basket bread, in one hand, mug in the other, and exhale deeply. This you think is medieval comfort food, not flashy, not fancy, but undeniably filling. You're halfway through your second mug of ale when the wind shifts again, and with it comes a briny breeze, sharp, fishy, and just this side of alarming. You crinkle your nose glance toward the source, and see it a line of carts and barrels under a flap of patched canvas proudly displaying the fishy side of fair snacking. It's a bold section. The faint-hearted might steer clear, but you step closer. Curiosity and courage in equal measure. First up, smoked herring. Dozens of them, silvery and stiff, hang by their tails like grim little flags. One vendor holds a pair in each hand like musical instruments, clacking them together to attract customers. It's wildly effective. You buy one wrapped in waxed linen and bite into the tail end. It's dry, salty, aggressively smoky, and has the texture of tough leather left too long in the sun. And yet, you want more. The sharp saltiness balances beautifully with the sweetness of the ale still lingering in your mouth. You finish the fish in surprisingly few bites, bones and all. Next to it, a younger vendor, barely more than a boy, is arranging coils of something that looks like jerky, but glistens strangely. Eel strips, he says. Smoked, salted, and sun-dried. You take a piece. It's firm, chewy, and tangy, flavoured with vinegar and mustard seed. You imagine it, lasting months in a saddlebag, or possibly forever. Definitely not bedtime food, unless you're dreaming of bogs. Historians still argue whether dried fish like this was truly snack fare, or merely preserved for travel. But fairs brought out all the unusual eats, especially for those who couldn't afford fresh game or roast beef. Salted fish, oddly enough, was considered a reliable and portable luxury. You wander past barrels brimming with pickled things. Not all of them are immediately identifiable. One is clearly hard-boiled eggs, their shells cracked and floating in a murky green brine. Another holds what appears to be raw garlic cloves steeped in ale vinegar. There's even a jar of pickled crab apples, small and knobbly, bobbing ominously like wet marbles. A woman offers you a pickled egg. You hesitate. She shrugs and pops one into her own mouth like a grape. Peer pressure triumphs. You bite in. It's sharp, rubbery, and oddly fizzy. Your tongue tingles. Good for the humours, she says cheerfully. You nod, blinking away tears. You move quickly to another cart, offering fish pies, but not the kind you're imagining. These are hand pies stuffed with minced pike perch, or even lamprey mixed with breadcrumbs, chopped onions, and a heavy dose of pepper. You pick one labelled Mystery Catch. It's surprisingly rich and flaky, and the pastry doesn't even try to pretend it's healthy. Further down, a group of boys is daring each other to eat fermented herring, which smells like a medieval dare. The vendor keeps them in a sealed jar and opens it with dramatic flair. The scent hits you like a ghost. One boy takes a bite and howls. You pass. Instead, you find solace in anchovy bread, a dark rye roll flecked with tiny fish and brushed with herb oil. The bread is chewy, the fish salty and potent. A woman next to you explains it's a coastal recipe, perfect for long trips and short tempers. Then comes something completely unexpected: seaweed crisps. A fisherman's wife hands you a bundle of dried roasted seaweed tied with twine. It's salty, brittle, and strangely delicious. You chew it slowly, savouring the smoky brine, while she nods approvingly. Good for your innards. Not to be outdone, a monk with a travelling cart is selling fish wafers, thin crackers flavoured with dried haddock and caraway. They're crisp, flaky, and seem to exist solely to spark debate. Historians still argue whether these snacks were made for travellers or for penitent monks avoiding rich foods. Either way, they're surprisingly addictive. You pocket a few. A young boy pushes a cart of fish pudding on a stick. You stop walking. He explains it's mashed cod mixed with oats and sage, formed into a log, skewered and fire-roasted. It looks dubious. You take a bite. It tastes like sadness and salt. You hand it back. He accepts this with grace. Trying to recover, you're offered a herring stuffed onion, roasted in its own skin. It's warm, savoury, and falls apart as you eat it. Fair delicacy, the vendor says. You believe her. Your hands now smell like victory. And fish. Not all fish snacks are strange. You find a stall selling crab cakes, tiny ones made of freshwater crab oats, and parsley fried in lard, and served with a wedge of pickled cucumber. It's delightful. The first thing you've eaten today that wouldn't terrify a modern guest. Last but not least, a proud father and daughter team hands you a fishball on a string. Yes, on a string. It's chewy peppery and held together with what might be egg and desperation. Popular with children, they say. Probably because they can wear it like jewellery. By now the scent of fish clings to your sleeves, your hair, and possibly your soul. But your stomach is full, your mouth tingles with brine, and your heart is oddly light. You've tasted things no one would put on a menu today, and that's the joy of it. As you wander away from the fish zone, wiping your hands on a communal cloth nailed to a post, you spot a roasted plum stand ahead, and hear the distant jingle of a sweet seller's bell. It's time for fruit. Your breath thanks you. You step gratefully into the sweet, sharp world of fruit vendors, a welcome oasis after a journey through eel skewers and fermented experiments. The air here is lighter, tinged with the scent of dried apples, vinegar-soaked pears, and something faintly floral that you hope isn't rosewater. It's quieter too. The shouting has mellowed to murmurs, and the stalls are a riot of rustic colour, woven baskets piled with berries, plums, figs, and fruits whose names have long vanished into footnotes. A woman in a headscarf waves you over and gestures to her basket of dried damsons, little purple gems shriveled by the sun, but still shining with natural sugars. Good for the throat, she says. You try one. It's chewy tart and surprisingly complex. There's a whisper of cinnamon, or perhaps that's just the leftover fish flavour, hitching a ride on your tongue. She offers you a second one wrapped in a dried lemon leaf. This version is softer, richer, and faintly boozy. Soaked in wine, she confides. For the sinners. You're not sure what that says about you, but you accept it anyway. Historians still argue whether dried fruits were made at home or preserved in bulk by monasteries for festivals. Some sources suggest itinerant traders brought barrels of raisins and figs from southern ports, where Moorish and Genoese merchants trafficked in spices sugar, and yes, plump, golden sultanas. You drift along the stalls like a bee among blossoms passing stringed apple garlands, honey-glazed pears, and roasted quinces nestled in ash for slow cooking. One vendor gives you a tiny roasted fig stuffed with nuts and crumbled cheese. It's warm, earthy, and tastes like someone's idea of heaven or a very competent convent kitchen. Then it happens. You witness the great plum scam. A wiry man with a thin beard is loudly announcing, "Fresh plums picked today," while standing next to a crate so dry you can hear the rattle of skins when he shakes it. Curious, you get closer. He hands a sample to a small girl. She bites into it and immediately spits it out. "That's a raisin in disguise," someone yells. A small riot of laughter erupts. Unfazed, the vendor switches tactics. These plums were aged for wisdom. He announces as if the shriveled state was a deliberate choice. Aged in Lent. Preserved in silence, you keep walking. biting into a piece of candied citron peel handed to you by a quiet vendor with a barrel of mysterious citrus slices. The sweetness is cut by bitterness in the best way, and you're told it's imported by boat and prayer from Italy or somewhere else south of Sunny. Further down you find pear rolls, roasted pears mashed and shaped into logs, then dusted in ground almond and dried rose petals. They're sticky floral and oddly romantic. A couple next to you shares one like spaghetti in a medieval date scene. You pretend not to see it. A boy runs by with a stick of spun fig leather, twirling it like a banner. It's the texture of old parchment, but sweeter and more pliable like medieval fruit roll-ups. You nibble an edge and catch a hint of clove. Behind him a woman carries a tray of apricot buttons, tiny discs of dried stone fruit baked with honey and lavender buds. You buy 3. You eat 4. It's unclear how. Then comes the confit section, a rarer sight. Fruits soaked in syrup and cooked slowly until translucent. A nun behind a modest stall hands you a sliver of quince confit, glassy fragrant and melt in the mouth. She offers a prayer with it. Blessings to keep your digestion gentle, she whispers. You nod, hoping the eel jerky from earlier hasn't cursed you too deeply. Not far from her is a trio of children selling pomegranate peels dipped in vinegar syrup, tart and crunchy like medieval sour candy. They dare you to try 2 at once. You do. Your face twists. They laugh. You bow solemnly. More traditional wares abound. Apple slices smoked over cherry wood, dried medlar with mead glaze, and even a curious dish labelled Monk's Delight, boiled berries mashed into oat cakes and set to dry in the sun. You ask which monk. They shrug. You pause at a simple basket of overripe pears, their skins wrinkled, their flesh soft and yielding. One bite and the juice runs down your chin. It tastes of the end of summer. The vendor wraps another in a cabbage leaf and tucks it into your satchel. For later, she says with a smile. You'll want something kind when the bells stop. There's fruit wine too light and fizzy, often served from stone pitchers. You sip a pear mead and feel your shoulders drop. Everything is a little blurry now, the flickering torches, the low hum of a viol, the gentle sway of a woman singing an old harvest song nearby. Your last fruit sample is the most mysterious, a stuffed date filled with pine nuts and ground coriander, then rolled in crushed mint. It's chewy, savoury, and unexpectedly fresh. You eat it slowly, savouring the strange blend of textures and flavours. The fruit stalls offer a kind of balance to the rest of the fair, a sense that even amid chaos, there are simple pleasures, patient ones sun-dried and spiced, and meant to be savoured. No shouting, no flames, just the soft rustle of leaves, the sticky weight of sweetness, and the quiet joy of nature's candy wrapped in linen. You leave the fruit lane with hands slightly tacky, your pockets full of mystery pouches, and your stomach vaguely buzzing with every flavour under the sun. Next up, pastries, puddings, and the eternal gamble of medieval tart crust. You emerge from the mellow hum of the fruit lane, fingers, sticky eyes, a little glassy and ready, whether you know it or not, for the chaos and charm of the medieval dessert gauntlet. You're entering a section of the fair where the air hangs thick with flour dust, where eggs may or may not be involved, and where every tart is a surprise emotionally and texturally. The first thing that hits you is the smell cinnamon, hot butter, and slightly burnt crust, like a bakery that's just learned ambition. You drift toward a squat wooden table where a girl in a soot-streaked apron is fanning a tray of custard flans. They wobble perilously in the breeze. You take one. The top is golden, the filling is soft, and the flavour is fine, mildly eggy, slightly sweet, possibly medicinal. You're told it's thickened with rice flour and patience. Nearby, a wiry man slaps down what he calls gooseberry clappers, a kind of open-faced tart filled with mashed green berries sweetened with a hint of mead. The crust is scorched at the edge, and the filling bubbles ominously. You take a bite and find yourself puckering involuntarily. It's like biting into a joke sour, then sweet, then weirdly satisfying. Historians still argue whether these medieval puddings were actual desserts, or merely the end result of using up everything left in the larder. Some records mention spiced egg pies for Lent, or oat custards made for saints' days. One scribe famously described a tart as a crust most hollow and wet within, yet pleasant to the learned tongue. Whatever that means, it fits. You pass a vendor stirring plum mash into miniature tart shells. She warns you they're runny today. You bite into one anyway. The filling spills immediately down your wrist and into your sleeve. You lick it clean. Worth it. Then comes the almond puddings, soft, creamy, sometimes almost grainy. A monk in a floppy hat serves a bowl of warm almond milk, thickened with breadcrumbs, and sugar topped with slices of pear. He calls it sleep food. You believe him. It tastes like nursery memories. A boy runs by, holding what looks like a pancake, but thicker and steaming. It's a huff cake made with flour ale and wild yeast, then cooked on a griddle and slathered with honey butter. You chase him down and get your own. It's fluffy warm and tastes like a hug dipped in beeswax. Another stand offers rose custard puffs made from dried rose petals crushed into sweetened curd and stuffed inside what looks like a puff pastry, though the pastry is more hopeful flatbread than anything flaky. Still, the flavour is light and floral, like edible perfume with a pleasant aftershock. Then you see it, the undercooked tart table. It's not labelled as such, but you can tell. A trio of young cooks are frantically trying to balance heat dough and timing. The results are inconsistent. Some are crisp-bottomed and golden, others sag in the middle, their fillings trembling like pudding on a wagon ride. You try one labelled apple and spice. The top is magnificent, the bottom is soup. It tastes excellent though, and you admire their bravery. Just beyond them is a woman with mead cakes, dense, chewy rounds, made with honey wine and nut flour. They smell like festival nights and poor decisions. You eat one and immediately feel more poetic. She offers you another for inspiration. You nod gravely and accept. You stumble next into a corner, offering spice fritters, small battered balls fried in lard and dusted with a mix of cinnamon cloves and pepper. You bite in and blink. It's spicy sweet and alarmingly addictive. They call them fire bells, and one child swears they make you dream of dragons. Then there are the cheese tarts. Some are sweet, others salty, and you don't find out which until you bite in. Your first is creamy and lemony, almost like a rustic cheesecake. Your second is garlic and sage. You eat them both confused but content. One woman proudly displays her ginger cream folds, a kind of flatbread rolled with spiced custard and roasted chestnuts. The edges are dusted with fine sugar. She says the recipe came from a traveller south of Spain, east of Sens. You eat one, then another, then wish you'd brought a pocket of cold milk, or a medieval fridge, and finally the nut pies. Oh, the nut pies. Small, round, sticky as sin, filled with crushed hazelnuts, almonds, and walnuts held together by honey fig paste, and a vague sense of mischief. They taste like the holidays. Any holidays. All holidays. You want to eat 3. You settle for 2.5. Somewhere nearby, a bell rings softly, someone selling milk pudding pots. You follow the sound and find a row of tiny clay dishes filled with thick, chilled cream and honey. They've been resting near a shallow stream to cool. You crack the skin on top and spoon it slowly, like you're being rewarded for good behaviour. You haven't been, but the pudding doesn't ask questions. And just when you think you're done, someone offers you a horse. Sleeper's Tart. A rare fare treat said to help with sleep and dreams. It's made with poppy seed paste, warm milk curd, and a sprinkling of nutmeg. You eat it, your eyelids feel heavier. The pudding lane isn't elegant. It's messy, runny, often experimental, and sometimes slightly underbaked. But it's also joyful, bursting with creativity, generosity, and a fair bit of culinary chaos. You leave with a smudge of custard on your chin, a belly full of almond and spice, and a strange peace in your bones. The fare continues, the bells ring, and someone somewhere yells about boiled peas on a stick. Time to explore the walking snack sellers. As you meander away from the pudding, chaos hands still sweet with sticky nut crust, you begin to notice a different sort of movement, quicker, more erratic, always just ahead of where you're looking. Snack peddlers, the mobile warriors of the fair. Unlike the anchored vendors with their cauldrons and carts, these folks roam the fair with trays, baskets, and sometimes simply two very full hands. They weave between jugglers and pigs, shout from under wide hats, and carry the distinct energy of people who've had exactly enough sleep and way too much mulled cider. The first one who crosses your path is a wiry woman with a cloth-slung basket calling out, "Roasted peas, warm your hands and your soul." You buy a handful, wrapped in an old page from a discarded prayer pamphlet. The peas are crunchy, slightly charred, and tossed with smoked salt and sage. They rattle in your palm like medieval trail mix. Right behind her is a boy of maybe 11 with a tray of spiced hazelnuts roasted over coals and rolled in honey and mustard seed. He jingles a little bell as he walks the scent trailing behind like bait. You toss him a coin and receive a small cone of oiled parchment filled with warm, golden treats. You pop one into your mouth and immediately sneeze. Too much pepper, but in a good way. Historians still argue whether these peddlers worked independently or were hired by the larger stalls to move excess goods. What's certain is they filled the gaps reaching the tired, the indecisive. The ones who didn't want to commit to standing in line for a stew, but still needed something, anything to munch. A lanky fellow with no shoes and a feather behind his ear dances by balancing a tray of fried dough knots dusted in dried thyme and cheese. He sings a tune that rhymes flour with power and offers a discount if you can name 3 saints without blinking. You can't. You pay full price. The knot is soft, chewy, and deeply satisfying, like garlic bread that got lost on its way to dinner. Next up, quill snacks. You blink. They look like slender breadsticks shaped and painted with egg wash to resemble writing quills. A girl in a green smock tells you they're dipped in beer mustard and crushed seeds. You ask why they're shaped like quills. She shrugs. People like ideas with their food. You take 2. They snap audibly. Excellent crunch. A man with one eye and a gold tooth carries a large wheel strapped to his chest inside it, a carousel of pie slices. He spins it like a game. Land on apple, win a smile. Land on kidney, win character. You give it a whirl. It stops between pear and parsnip. You take both. One is sweet, one is not. Both are delicious. There are onion cakes sold from a sack, little fried discs that look like floppy coins and smell like a tavern at closing time. You bite into one and get a mouthful of caramelized onion flour and what might be lard. You smile through it. Some peddlers go minimal. A barefoot woman walks by with sticks of dried rhubarb tied with twine. You buy one and chew thoughtfully. It's sour tough and makes you look serious. A man passing you nods approvingly. Scholars, snack, he mutters. You feel smarter already. Others go maximal. One teenager has strapped an entire miniature oven to his back and is roasting cheese cubes on skewers over a coal tray. You watch mesmerised as he sprinkles herbs with exaggerated flair. The cheese is sharp, warm, and served with a dollop of plum jam. It's one of the best things you've eaten all day. He's already halfway down the lane before you can ask for another. One peddler walks with a basket of seed biscuits, dense gritty little wheels of oat, fennel flax and poppy seeds sweetened with molasses. He hands them out like currency. You take one and chew until your jaw complains. It's not glamorous, but it'll keep you alive through at least 2 jousting tournaments and a minor peasant revolt. Then there's the man known only as the Crumble. He appears without warning, bellows, tart crusts, and disappears just as fast. His wares are shards of broken pies that is literally just crust and a hint of filling. You buy a paper cone of warm fragments sprinkled with coarse sugar and fig dust. You regret nothing. Another vendor pushes a wheelbarrow of herbed griddle scones, browned, uneven, filled with cheese or leek, or occasionally both. He swears each one tells your fortune. Yours collapses in the middle. Ah, he says. Uncertainty ahead. You nod solemnly and keep eating. A barefoot pair of twins trot past, carrying tiny bread horns filled with curried egg and wild greens. You don't even know what curried means in this context, but your nose approves. You follow them down the lane until you catch up. The bread is soft, the filling creamy. You feel briefly, blissfully regale. One final snack vendor stops you cold. A slow-moving woman with a cane and a shawl full of charcoal honey drops tiny candies meant to settle the belly and quiet the mouth. You buy 2, tuck one in your cheek, and feel it melt slowly, coating your throat in soot and sugar. It's oddly relaxing. As you stand at a crossroads, half a tart in one hand, fried cheese skewer in the other. You look around at the endless stream of walking snack merchants. They crisscross the fair like neurons firing flavour impulses to every part of this buzzing beast of a crowd. The peddlers are the heartbeat of the fair. They bring sustenance when your feet ache, distraction when your patience wanes, and joy when you least expect it. With a full belly and a crumb-covered cloak, you continue on toward the smell of almond and sanctity. Time to meet the nuns who bake. The fair's tone begins to shift again. The drums and shouts fade to murmurs and chimes. The scent of frying fat grows thinner, replaced by something gentler. Rosemary almond milk and the unmistakable calm of orderly hands at work. You've stumbled upon one of the most quietly powerful corners of any 14th century fair, the nuns' pastry stand. It's not a single stall, but a series of carefully spaced tables under a linen awning flanked by baskets and boxes arranged with monastic precision. No jingling, no shouting, just quiet offers, gentle nods, and the occasional reminder that your coin supports a convent's infirmary or orphanage. You reach for a sample and pause. Are you about to commit pastry-based blasphemy? The nun behind the first table smiles warmly. You can take 2, she says, sliding forward a tray of almond custard squares. They're golden on top, creamy inside, and nestled in crusts as thin as folded linen. You try one expecting piety. Instead you get richness, subtle sweetness, and a custard so smooth it feels illicit. You chew slowly, reverently. Many of these pastries come from centuries-old recipes, some recorded in convent records, others pass through whispered tradition. Historians still argue whether these sweets were ever meant for public sale, or if fairs like this were just rare exceptions. Either way, they taste like devotion and butter. At the next table, a younger nun offers rosewater fritters, small puffed parcels fried until golden and rolled in dried sugarcane dust. They help with melancholy, she explains, handing you one with tongs. You bite into it. The outside is crisp, the inside airy, and faintly floral. You suddenly feel like you understand poetry better. A third table features what look like miniature cheesecakes. They're called tarte de brie, made from fresh curds, egg yolks, sugar, and just enough ginger to tingle the tongue. You take a small one. It crumbles like clouds and vanishes almost immediately. You consider asking for 3 more, but instead mumble something about coming back later. The nun nods knowingly. You notice a group of children crowded around a nun, holding what looks like a candle snuffer. It's actually a mould for pressed seed cakes shaped like stars and saints' faces. The cakes themselves are made from ground walnuts, honey, and fig paste, then stamped and dried. You're handed one with St. Leonard's solemn frown imprinted on top. You eat his face. It's chewy and nutty, and you suddenly want to confess something. Nearby, a tall nun is doling out pastry rolls stuffed with pear and sage. The dough is flaky, the filling both sweet and savoury, and the entire effect feels like a lullaby wrapped in carbs. She tells you it's often made for feast days, but the Lord won't mind if it brings comfort. You thank her with your eyes full of tart. Then comes the convent nougat. Yes, medieval nougat. It's soft, dense, and packed with almonds and candied orange peel. No chocolate, of course, but there's something else, spiced wine, maybe? You chew slowly, letting the flavours unfold like parchment. A nearby nun is quietly praying as she stacks more onto a tray. In one corner, under the shade of a patched banner depicting a faintly smiling angel, a table offers rice cakes and milk jelly. The rice has been boiled, mashed, sweetened with milk and honey, then set into firm, sliceable squares. A boy ahead of you asks if it's pudding. The nun replies it's nourishment. The boy eats too and sits down silently, blinking slowly. You do the same. There are also hazelnut biscuits, flat, thin wafers stamped with crosses, or birds depending on the feast day. Some are soft, some are crisp, all are mildly sweet and deeply addictive. You buy a pouch tied with twine. They rattle like edible rosary beads in your pocket. Then you spot something truly strange, angel's bread. It's a thick, pale loaf, dusted with powdered rose sugar and wrapped in white cloth. It's meant to be broken, with others not bitten into alone. The nun explains it's often given to grieving families or pilgrims. You buy a half loaf, for later, or for someone. The final station is simple, just one large pot of po, blessed milk. Warm almond milk, steeped with cinnamon, nutmeg and chamomile. It's ladled into wooden cups and sipped like a prayer. You close your eyes and take a slow drink. The warmth spreads instantly, as if someone just tucked a quilt around your bones. No one raises their voice here. No one pushes. People simply wait their turn, offer a coin, receive a kindness wrapped in pastry. The air hums with soft gratitude and a sweetness that feels ancient. You walk away slowly, pocket full of biscuits, mind full of calm. The music of the fair returns in the distance, flutes laughter, the clatter of hooves, but it all sounds softer now. Behind you the nuns continue to slice stir and serve their hands steady, their pace patient. You don't look back. You just keep walking, comforted in a way you didn't expect from a square of custard and a sip of milk. Next up, the strange, strict and sometimes hilarious world of fair food laws and fines. You leave the gentle warmth of the nun's pastry haven and drift toward a much less forgiving part of the fair, where food meets law and snacks can get you fined. You might expect chaos to reign in a medieval marketplace, but oh no. Behind the haze of smoke and clatter of spoons, there are rules. So many rules. And in true medieval fashion, they range from weirdly specific to blessedly absurd. Your first brush with this world comes when a boy, with a crooked grin, offers you a meat pie. Too good to be legal. You laugh. He doesn't. They'll weigh it, he whispers. If it's overstuffed, I get fined. You blink. Yes, that's real. In many 14th century English fairs, meat pies were subject to strict portion regulations. The goal, prevent fraud. Too much filling meant the baker might be hoarding or using off-books meat. Too little, and you were cheating customers. A narrow legal crust margin, if you will. Historians still argue whether these rules were consistently enforced or simply a great excuse to harass that one baker who refused to join the guild. But pie weight was serious business. You follow a loud scuffle to a stall where a vendor is defending the size of his beef roll. A town official holds a scale looking deeply unimpressed. "This is a generous interpretation of a serving," he mutters. The vendor shrugs. The customer looks hungry. Nearby, a woman selling spiced lentil fritters has posted a sign approved by Cook's Guild 1342. She tells you she once got fined for using saffron without permission. Turns out the precious spice was sometimes restricted either due to cost hoarding rumours or the fear that people might start seasoning things too creatively. Then there's the mustard scandal. You overhear two old men discussing the time a man was penalised for selling unblessed mustard that made 5 pilgrims sneeze so violently they disrupted a sermon. Was it real? Possibly. Was it written down in the town ledger as incident of the hot sauce offence? Almost definitely. Regulation extended to breads too. At one stall, a gruff baker shows you a guild-approved loaf stamped with an official symbol. "It proves I didn't cheat the flour weight," he explains. You ask what happens if someone does cheat. He leans in. Public shaming. Sometimes a dunk in the fish barrel. You nod solemnly. Justice is fishy. Then there were ale tasters, actual officials who walked around tasting drinks to make sure they weren't watered down. You spot one now wearing a feathered cap and sipping discreetly from a clay mug. He swishes sniffs and nods to the brewer. Approval granted. Further down, a man offers you berry pastries, certified by the clerk. You ask who the clerk is. He points vaguely toward a red-faced man asleep under a table. That one. When he's awake. You buy 2 pastries and hope for the best. Some stalls display official-looking charters or scrolls meant to show that their ingredients were sourced legally, or at least locally. You see one proclaiming all fruit gathered within 2 leagues. No stolen orchard goods. Underneath, someone has scribbled, "Except the pears." You learn that butchers often needed licenses to sell cooked meat. Otherwise they risked accusations of selling spoiled cuts disguised in spices or pastry. One vendor with greasy hands assures you that his mutton pasties are certified unquestionable. You appreciate the honesty. At a nearby cart, a woman selling cheese curd pastes recounts the time her cousin was fined for selling soft milk things without proper chilling. You raise an eyebrow. How would they chill it? It. She grins. Exactly. There's even a posted list of forbidden words. Certain claims like cure-all miracle recipe or never spoils could land a seller in hot water. You see a roasted nut vendor crossing out invincibility almonds on his sign and replacing it with good mood nuts. A more recent development, you're told, is standardised measure cups, wooden scoops marked by local authorities to ensure equal portions. You spot one now, a vendor serving stew ladles labelled with a carved boar's tooth. Fair and square, he says. You agree, though. You still find a fish scale in your spoon. Even the shape of some goods was regulated. Tarts made for saint days had to follow particular patterns. Crosses, doves, the occasional fish. A vendor tells you he once shaped a custard, like a hedgehog's, and got fined for creature confusion. Then there's the no-night sales rule, meant to prevent buyers from being swindled under torchlights. A boy rushes past you yelling, "Last call for daylight dumplings." You grab one out of sheer panic. It's warm, stuffed with onions, and absolutely worth the threat of legal exposure. You pass a man roasting chestnuts who tells you a cautionary tale. One year someone flavoured these with ale dregs. Nearly started a riot. Now we roast plain. You nod, munching on a perfectly bland, legally compliant nut. You spot a licensing desk under a crooked banner. The clerk is napping again, but his desk is stacked with complaint scrolls. You peek at one, Complaint number 191. Goose tarts were not goose. Possibly duck. Possibly apple. You make a mental note trust, but verify. As evening falls, lanterns flicker to life and enforcement begins to thin. Vendors start stretching the rules, offering 2-for-1 pies, sneaking saffron into puddings, selling salted plums in unmarked pouches. It's the twilight hour of culinary rebellion. And yet even with the rules and fines and mustered crimes, there's joy in it all. The food laws aren't there to stifle, they're a strange kind of assurance. A way to say, this fair may be muddy and chaotic, but your fritter, it's legit. You wander on past the echoing clink of tasting cups and the last argument over dumpling weight toward a darker corner of the fair where food goes wrong fast. Spoilage, strange remedies, and the eternal battle against bad barrels await. Evening's cooled breath begins to creep in, and with it, a quiet truth settles over the fair. Not all food here is your friend. You've wandered from the heart of commerce and performance into a quieter, shadier stretch, where the torches flicker lower and the vendors look a little too enthusiastic about their boiled cabbage. Welcome to the land of spoiled snacks, accidental fermentation, and questionable preservation. You may have braved eel jerky and pickled eggs, but now it's time for the real gamble. Your first clue that things are changing. A pungent sour scent drifting from a row of barrels under a tattered tarp. You approach cautiously. A vendor lifts a lid with theatrical flair to reveal turnip mash preserved with vinegar steam. It looks like porridge that's been through something traumatic. He offers you a spoon. You accept it because that's who you are now. It tastes fine. Earthy, sharp, oddly fizzy at the back of your throat. You finish the bite, then politely decline seconds. Can't win 'em all. He chuckles and stirs the barrel with a stick you suspect once belonged to a broom. Historians still argue about the exact role of spoilage in medieval diets. With limited preservation methods and unpredictable supply chains, eating things on the edge of freshness wasn't just common, it was survival. Salt, vinegar, ash, smoking, sun-drying, and honey all played roles, but so did sheer optimism. A girl skips by with a tray of midday eggs, boiled, shelled, and wrapped in cabbage leaves. Eat them before they turn, she chirps. You ask, how will I know? She shrugs. Your nose will tell you. You try one. It's still cool, firm, salty. You breathe out slowly, relieved. A nearby stall offers soured oatcakes, left out too long, and now tangy with a vinegar punch. Acquired taste, the baker says. Best with mustard. She slathers a thick dollop on top. It helps, but only just. Ah yes, mustard. The saviour of sketchy snacks. You approach a trio of barrels labelled simply Hot Hotter and Lord's Mercy. Each holds a different batch of spicy mustard meant to disguise sins in meats, grains, or vegetables that should have gone to their eternal reward yesterday. You try the middle one on a piece of stale bread. It hits you in the sinuses like divine punishment. You'll never taste mould again, the vendor promises. You believe him. Behind him, someone is whispering about miracle cheese. You investigate. A woman reveals a block of cheese the colour of tarnished bronze. Left it too close to the hearth, she explains. Now it sings. You listen. It does hum. Or perhaps buzz. You try a crumb. It's pungent, rich, and very much alive. Penicillin probably someone offers. You move on. One particularly bold vendor is offering sun-dried broth. You blink. He explains stew poured onto flat stones, dried by the sun, scraped off, and reconstituted with warm water. Like magic, he says. You sip. It tastes like concentrated regret and time. There's a small stall offering mead gummies, leftover mead boiled down and cooled into chewy translucent squares. They're oddly strong, possibly flammable. You take one, it sticks to your teeth and your conscience. Further down, a woman fans trays of moulded barley biscuits, explaining that a bit of fuzz adds depth. You nod, pretending to believe her. A goat nearby eats one and immediately lies down. It's unclear if from satisfaction or surrender. You approach a curious vendor dressed in black velvet with a tray of ferment cakes. He describes them as the edge between death and dessert. They're oat patties, stored in barrels of spiced vinegar, then roasted and served with dried onion. They smell like vinegar-dipped candles. You try half. It tastes like being very brave. A soft whimper draws your attention to a cluster of barrels with haphazard lids. Sauerkraut experiments, a woman explains. Some are ready, some are enthusiastic. You cautiously try a scoop of cabbage from the mostly fine batch. It's sharp, fizzy and vaguely fruity. Accidental wine, she nods. You don't ask follow-up questions. And then the pickle barrel incident. You watch as a vendor trips over his own robe, sending a barrel of pickled radishes spilling into the grass. People scream, dogs flee, a baby cries. The air fills with vinegar and disappointment. He stands up, brushes his knees and sighs. Third time today. Not all spoilage is accidental, though. A proud woman is selling aged garlic, spread a blackened, oily paste she claims is good for blood and bad marriages. You try a dab on a cracker. It's rich umami-packed and slightly terrifying. You'd eat more, but you fear your dreams will involve ghosts. A boy walks by with a cup of ale jelly. It wiggles unnaturally and smells like beer left in the sun. He offers you a sip. You decline. Suit yourself, he says, and drinks it like soup, and then a final flourish dust pies. Flat dry biscuits made from barley flour salt, and whatever's left. No sugar, no joy, just crunch. A man hands you one and says, "You won't like it, but you'll remember it." He's not wrong. Despite the questionable textures and aggressive aromas, this corner of the fair isn't a place of failure. It's one of resilience, of experimentation, of people trying to turn what might go bad into something almost good, maybe even great, with the right mustard. You wipe your hands with a cloth that smells like vinegar and roasted onion and feel stronger. Or stranger. Maybe both. Your stomach may need a break, but your mind is clear. You've survived the spoil zone. And just ahead, torchlight flickers on velvet banners, and perfume smoke drifts your way. It's time to explore the culinary class divide, what the nobles snacked on, and why peasants laughed at it. You leave behind the vinegar mist and cabbage fugue of the spoil zone and step into something fancier. The air shifts. The ground here is slightly less muddy. There's music, lutes, flutes, something with bells, and the unmistakable scent of roasted almonds mingled with clove. You've arrived in the fair's genteel corner where the gentry snack. It's a quieter space, not because it's smaller, but because the people here don't shout. They beckon. They gesture. Their servers do the shouting for them. And even then, it's more of a dramatic proclamation. You watch as a boy in brocade loudly announces plum-stuffed pheasant balls sautéed in imported goose fat. You step closer. These stalls are built differently. Elevated platforms, silk-draped counters, cushions, stools. Some have little awnings to block the peasant sun. The dishes here are prettier, smaller, and somehow more confident about not feeding you fully. Your first noble snack, almond marchpane petals. A tray of delicate pink curls shaped like flower blossoms made from almond paste rosewater, and something that gives them a faint shimmer. You're handed one by a man wearing rings on every finger. Mouth jewels, he calls them. You bite. It's sweet, perfumed, and disintegrates like edible silk. You immediately want 5 more, but the man is already fanning himself and moving on. Historians still argue whether these foods were for show or substance. Did nobles really eat like this, or was it just performance? What's certain is that status foods were everywhere, gilded, glossed, and often completely impractical to carry, much less chew. Nearby, a server slices paper-thin rounds of cinnamon venison, a dried meat cured in wine, and dusted with spices. Good for letters or lovers, she says, placing one on your palm like a relic. It melts slowly, strangely rich, and leaves your lips tingling. A noble woman twirls a skewer of saffron prunes, giggling between bites. Another couple nibbles cheese coins, hard discs of pressed smoked cheese, painted with egg yolk for shine. They clink them like toasts before eating. You try one. It's sharp, salty, and somehow proud. And then there's the jelly table. It gleams in the torchlight, a quivering display of moulded fruit jellies, wine reductions, and sugar windows. One glassy cube contains a single violet. Another is striped like a tapestry. You ask the server how long they take to make. She sighs. About 3 days. You eat 1 in 3 seconds. It tastes like expensive fruit and fleeting happiness. Peasants walking by stop to gawk. One man snorts, "Wouldn't feed a rat." Another laughs. Looks like a sneeze on a plate. They're not wrong. The portions are tiny. But the flavour is divine. You're offered a gilded biscuit painted with edible gold leaf. It's buttery dense and crumbles into elegance. You feel wealthier for having swallowed it. You overhear a noble discussing a cooling lemon tart from France, while another boasts about peacock jerky from Kent. The server quietly confirms it's actually turkey dyed blue. But it does look expensive, doesn't it? She winks. Some of the foods verge on strange. You're handed a spiced egg yolk cube, a gelatinous block seasoned with mace and mint. It's smooth, oddly sweet, and confusing to your modern sensibilities. But the crowd adores it. It's like biting into a riddle, someone declares. You nod, politely. Then there's perfumed sugar bark, a crisp sheet of sugar rosewater, and cardamom snapped into shards, and served with a fanfare. A girl next to you claims it gives her dreams of swans. You believe her. You feel like you've just inhaled a poem. And still, despite all this luxury, a tray of pickled fennel seeds gets passed around like it's a treasure. You try one. It's intense. Green, bright, and oddly awakening. Good for the breath, someone offers. And the nerves. The crowd here eats slowly, deliberately. They dab at their lips with embroidered cloths, drink pear cordial from glass flutes, and discuss flavour with the same intensity others save for land disputes. But here's the thing, many of the peasants you saw earlier wouldn't want this. Not just because it's fussy or expensive, but because it lacks heart. There's no fry oil, no cheese dripping down your wrist, no satisfaction in your jaw. It's a performance. A lovely, shimmering, edible ballet, but one that leaves you hungry by Act 3. You overhear a group of servants gossiping in the shadow of a velvet curtain. They eat like birds, one mutters. I'd kill for a fried onion loaf. You're inclined to agree. Still, it's good to sample the range, to taste what wealth chews when no one's watching. And there's no denying the pleasure of a candied rose petal pressed between slivers of gingered apple. You close your eyes. It's delicious. It's ephemeral. It's gone. Your last noble snack is a wine jelly biscuit sandwich, 2 thin crackers filled with a dollop of reduced claret gel. The server says it's meant to cleanse the mind. It mostly sticks to your teeth. As you leave, a nobleman raises his tiny tart and says, "We eat with elegance or not at all." A boy behind you throws a leak. It's time to return to the ground, to close the loop, to wrap things up as only a full belly and tired feet can, with one final sticky treat and the long walk home. The fair is beginning to wind down now. The torches flicker low, their shadows stretching long across the trampled grass and patchwork stalls. Somewhere a pipe plays a soft, slow tune, wistful and wandering. The air carries a mix of smoke, hay, and the sweet sigh of things coming to an end. You walk a little slower now, the weight of the day pressing gently on your shoulders and in your belly. Still as the crowds thin and the noise dims, there's room for one more bite, one more bit of comfort before the cold sets in. You find yourself at a modest stand far from the noble's velvet ropes or the mustard slick chaos of the spoil zone. It's a crooked cart strung with beeswax candles and a sign that reads simply, "Farewell Treats." A woman with silver in her braid greets you with a warm nod and a clay platter of sticky oatcakes. They're soft, round, and still warm from a hidden brazier, rolled in honey and chopped hazelnuts. These are the kind of cakes that say goodbye the way a mother might gently with crumbs in your hair. You take one. It clings to your fingers like a sleepy child. You bite in. It's rich, heavy, and just sweet enough. A pause between footsteps. A period at the end of a very flavourful sentence. Next to her is a small basket of farewell leek tarts. Nothing fancy. Just minced leeks, eggs, a bit of cheese if they had any left. Wrapped in thin crust and brushed with the last of the fair's butter. You eat it slowly, the flavours familiar and humble. A nod to the land, to the common hands that fed it, and to the roots that made this feast possible. As you chew, the woman pours you a small cup of mulled cider, warm and fragrant with cloves and orange peel. "It's for your bones," she says, and the walk. You nod and sip. It wraps around your ribs like a soft quilt, sweet spiced with just a little edge like the fare itself. Around you tents are being folded down, trays stacked, banners rolled and packed. Vendors laugh softly as they count their coins and lick their fingers. Children sleep in baskets. A dog snores beneath a stool. You pass by one last vendor, handing out bits of leftover roasted pear, chilled now, but still sticky with mead glaze. He winks as he offers it. "One for the road," he says. You accept it with gratitude and let the juice drip onto your wrist without shame. Someone hands you a square of crumble crust, just the corner of what was surely a larger pie. You nibble it between gulps of cider and feel time slow down, like your body is reluctant to leave this strange, wonderful world of snack-laced history. The fair feels quieter now, as if it's exhaling with you. In the distance, a bell rings, soft, not summoning, but releasing. People start to trickle toward the outer paths, lanterns bobbing like sleepy stars. You walk with them, your steps softer, your mouth coated in honey, your breath warm with cider and clove. Someone hums a song behind you, low and old. You don't know the words, but it doesn't matter. It feels like memory, like something you once dreamed in a bed, warmed by wool and the scent of oatcakes. As the fair fades behind you, the road stretches out, muddy quiet, flanked by fields asleep under moonlight. You pat your satchel now, heavy with biscuit crumbs, fig paste, and probably a pickled plum or two you forgot to eat. Your hands are sticky. Your heart is full. You've walked the full circle of the 14th century English fair, not just a celebration, but a menu of hope, invention, survival, and indulgence. And now, full of roast sugar and improbable custards, you take your final steps. Toward rest, toward home, toward sleep. Yes. Hey guys, tonight, we're slipping into silk-lined sleeves and gliding into the flickering glow of a high medieval banquet, where the food is fragrant, the candles are tall, and the rose petals, they're candied perfumed and meant to be eaten between courses. You're standing just outside the great hall now. The floors are polished stone, cool beneath your shoes, though your shoes might actually be embroidered velvet slippers, because this evening you're not a peasant or a kitchen drudge. Tonight you are nobility. You enter not with a shout, but with a rustle of fabric of anticipation and possibly indigestion waiting politely in the wings. There's music, the high twang of a lute, the soft ripple of harp strings. The air smells like beeswax, roasted quail, lavender sachets tucked into chair cushions, and somewhere faintly burning rosemary. You glance around. The tables stretch long and narrow, more for display than ease of conversation. People speak in murmurs, mouths barely moving, under elaborately curled moustaches or jewel-dotted veils. The meal hasn't started yet, but it's already a performance. A ritual. A power play where your napkin may matter more than your title, and you probably won't survive it. Not because of intrigue or poisoning, though both are options, but because this isn't food in the way you know it. It's art alchemy and utterly relentless. The banquet will stretch hours. The dishes will number in the dozens. The ingredients will include things like almond milk, swan, liver, eel, custard, and rose petals boiled in syrup and rolled in powdered sugar. You will never be ready. You step over the threshold, the candles flare. A servant hands you a goblet warm spiced wine with a scent so complex it feels like a poem made of cloves. You sip. It burns slightly but pleasantly. The room is already filling. Noblemen and women perch on carved chairs draped in brocade, their eyes flicking toward the high table, where someone important is pretending not to be hungry. The food hasn't arrived yet, but already the air is thick with anticipation and with smell. Because in a noble banquet scent comes first. Before salt hits the tongue, before sauce touches plate, there's perfume. Not sprayed, of course carried. In flower garlands twined round roast birds in bundles of herbs beneath the bench, in delicate napkins steeped in rose water, and handed to each guest with reverence. You receive your napkin now. It's warm, slightly damp, smells like lavender and orange peel. You dab your fingers even though they aren't dirty. This isn't about hygiene, it's about preparing your mood, your mind, your palate. Historians still argue whether these opening gestures were more about status medicine or psychological trickery. What's certain, they worked. You already feel calmer, more refined, like someone who might eat a lily and not question it. A bell rings softly. The meal begins. Servants enter in synchronized waves, each carrying a dish, like a sacred object. There are baked apples filled with saffron rice, grilled trout, drizzled in elderflower syrup, capon glazed with quince, and bowls of candied rose petals. You stare at them. They shimmer slightly under the hall's golden light. Pale pink, deep crimson, a few scattered with crushed pistachio, or set atop small cushions of marzipan. Someone murmurs that these are to refresh the senses between courses. You take one hesitant. It's cool, lightly crisp, and melts into sugar and perfume on your tongue. You've just eaten a flower, and not by accident. You glance around. No one else looks surprised. This is normal. This is expected. It's not dessert. It's not decoration. It's intermission. A petaled breath between savoury acts. Someone offers you another. This one's been rolled in violet sugar and placed on a slice of pear. You eat it more confidently. The taste lingers. Your mouth feels cleansed, awakened, like it's been politely asked to continue. The first course arrives, then another, then another. In between each you're offered a scented delicacy rose petal jam on wafer-thin toast sugared elderflower, a cube of apple jelly with a candied daisy balanced perfectly on top, each one small, each one unnecessary, each one luxurious in its absolute refusal to nourish. Because that's the point. These aren't meals. They're gestures, signs that you have time, that you can afford 100 flowers to sweeten one bite, that you eat not just for hunger, but for reputation. You drink a bit more wine. The candles burn lower. The servants change your plate again, even though you haven't finished. And all the while, more petals appear. In your drink, on your spoon, in a tiny tartlet you almost mistake for soap. You're full and yet still eating. You're tired and yet the music continues. And somewhere between the roast suckling pig and the spiced almond porridge, you realise you like the flowers. You shift slightly in your cushioned chair, which is more ornate than comfortable, and glance at the table once again, not in hunger, but in curiosity. Because what you're really doing now, after the third rose petal interlude and the third wine change, is trying to understand how they think food should taste. Welcome to the strange and specific world of the medieval noble palate. It doesn't work the way yours does. Forget your neat distinctions between sweet and savoury. Disregard the idea of dessert as a final, sugary punctuation mark. In this hall, sugar is a spice, and spice is status, and fish can be sweet, and flowers can be dinner, and vinegar might be drizzled on pears with a laugh. You glance down at the course now being set before you: swan, breast glazed in honey, and pepper served beside a paste of dried plums and almonds, moulded into the shape of a small animal. It's beautiful. It's confusing. It smells like fruitcake and roasted meat got into a polite argument. You take a bite. Your tongue protests just a little. The honey is heavy. The pepper hits early. Then comes the dense, meaty richness of the bird and a sudden burst of cinnamon from the plum paste. It's like nothing you've had before, but somehow it works. Historians still argue whether the nobles of the 14th and 15th centuries genuinely enjoyed these flavours or simply pretended to. The line between appetite and performance was thin, but the records are clear. They wrote down these recipes, repeated them, refined them. This was no accident. This was taste. And that taste, it was about layering, contrasting, flipping the script, a slice of eel pie wrapped in fig leaves, cold pottage dusted with powdered sugar, venison soaked in rosewater and laid on toasted saffron bread. You chew slowly, carefully, trying to decode what each flavour is doing. And there's a moment, a brief shimmering second, when it feels like you get it. The salt softens the sweetness. The spice cuts the fat. The flour resets everything. A rhythm emerges. You sip your wine. Another petal arrives, this time a candied pansy on a cracker made from spiced barley flour. It's as much scent as taste, and you're learning to let both lead. You watch the diners around you. Some chew thoughtfully, others more robotically. But the servers, they move like dancers. Precision, timing. They're not just feeding you, they're curating your experience. And you realise that everything on this table, every glaze, jelly, custard, and flour, exists in relation to something else. It's not about whether a bite is good. It's about whether it's right here, right now, following that one before the next. There's an elegance to it, and an absurdity. Take, for example, the spiced turnip tart served in a crust of butter and mace. It shouldn't work. And yet after the saffron apple slices and elderflower lamb, your palate welcomes it like an old friend wearing a new hat. You ask a nearby guest softly how she keeps track of it all. She smiles delicately, dabbing her mouth with a cloth embroidered in gold thread. You don't, she says. You just surrender. So you do. You stop trying to categorize. You start trusting the petals. Another arrives, this time a sugared violet perched atop a cube of quince jelly. It looks like a gemstone, smells like a spring morning, and tastes like air dressed in sugar. It doesn't fill you, but it changes you just a little. You wonder what the kitchen looks like right now. Probably smoky, chaotic. A dozen cooks trying to plate with trembling fingers. A master cook shouting instructions. A boy torching almond crusts. Somewhere someone is boiling flowers. Because these petals aren't raw, they're candied, simmered, infused, preserved. These aren't garden trimmings, they're engineered flavour. Tiny edible pauses between dishes that whisper, breathe. Begin again. A new course arrives, spiced rabbit in a sauce of ginger and prunes. It smells deep, earthy and dark. You take a bite, then petal time. A rose rolled in sugar, dusted with crushed clove, placed delicately atop a shortbread round. You eat it in one bite, and it erases everything. The rabbit disappears. The prunes vanish. You are reset. And that's the point. The noble palate isn't looking for satisfaction. It's not hunting for satiety. It's crafting an experience, a tide of textures and temperatures and tastes, rising and falling with petals as oars. Some say it's wasteful, pretentious. You wouldn't disagree. But in this chair, in this hall with these servants, and this sugar, you begin to understand the petal isn't just a snack. It's punctuation. It's power. It's poetry rolled in sugar and placed between the meat and the pie. Your stomach may be confused. Your tongue. It's starting to learn the dialect. And your mind, lulled by flavour and flowers, begins to quiet. You lean back. The music swells. Another course arrives, small, strange, shimmering. You don't even blink. You reach for the next petal. You're not even halfway through the meal, and yet it feels as though you've been here for years in a good way. Time slows inside the banquet hall. It's not just the wine or the sheer volume of goose liver involved, it's the rhythm, the ritual, the way each movement, each flavour unfolds like a scene in a play. And before any of the heavier courses, there's always the quiet overture, scented towels and spiced wine. Your fingers twitch as another servant approaches, silver tray, balanced effortlessly in one hand, a stack of steamed linen cloths, neatly folded, and releasing plumes of lavender and orange blossom. It's not a napkin, it's not for mess. It's a gesture, a pause, a reset. You take one. It's warm and damp and smells like a dream someone had about cleanliness. You dab your fingertips, press it lightly to your face, and feel your entire body exhale. This is not just a refreshment, it's a signal. A moment that says what comes next will be new, different, possibly alarming. And you are now officially prepared to face it. Hands clean, senses alert, breath softly perfumed. Historians still argue whether these scented towels were purely ceremonial or meant to counteract the less delicate aromas of medieval dining. You know, the roasted animals, open hearths, and 37 people sharing 3 trenchers. But whatever their origin, they became standard. A cue, a cleansing. And with the towel comes the wine. But not just any wine. This is Hippocras, the medieval answer to cocktails made from red wine, steeped with sugar, cinnamon, ginger, and sometimes, you guessed it, rose petals. It's warm, spiced, and tastes like someone liquefied a velvet curtain. You sip slowly. The sugar hits first, then the heat of the ginger, and finally a hint of something floral, faint but haunting. A whisper of perfume on your palate. It is both medicine and invitation. A noblewoman nearby swirls her cup, watching the candlelight flicker across the surface. Opens the humours, she says knowingly. Calms the bile. You nod, not entirely sure what your bile is up to, but confident it's now less problematic. Then comes the mouth freshener, passed around in little gilded boxes, rose-scented pastilles made from sugar, and crushed petals bound with gum, Arabic, and shaped like tiny beads. You're handed one, and let it melt slowly. It tastes like perfume with a secret, like breath disguised as a flower. This moment, the towel, the wine, the sugar bead, is not a course. It's not appetizers. It's something older, more elegant. A transition. A permission slip for your senses to sharpen and your stomach to soften. You lean back. You are now officially ready to eat a porpoise glazed with violets, or pigeon in lavender syrup, or whatever this next course happens to be. But not yet, because the music softens, the servers wait, and the room hangs in the warm hush of expectation. The towels are collected, the wine cups are topped again, and then just as you begin to think the next bite must be mere seconds away, a servant brings out a platter. On it, candied herbs and flower petals. You recognise rose, of course. Maybe violet. There's something green that might be lemon balm. You're handed a sugared sage leaf. It crunches, sweet and faintly medicinal, like dessert with a job to do. And then you get another rose petal. This one dusted with powdered ginger and lightly curled like it's been resting in a dream. You let it melt on your tongue. It tastes like nothing you know, like summer mornings and silk sheets, and something from a memory you don't quite have. The flavours don't shout. They don't even speak. They hum. Low and slow, like lullabies for your tongue. They're not here to feed you. They're here to remind you why you want to be fed at all. You glance around. No one's speaking. Everyone's tasting. Quietly. Deliberately. As if this is the whole point. And maybe it is. Historians often describe this phase of the banquet as a prelude of calm, where flavours are muted, balanced meant to ease the body into digestion and elevate the mind. Some argue it had medicinal roots, aligning the body's humours before heavier dishes arrived. Others say it was just nobles being extra. Either way it works. The room feels still now, ready, like an orchestra that's just tuned up and inhaled. The servants nod. A bell rings low and clear, and the first true course begins to arrive. But in your mouth, the rose still lingers. Not sweet anymore, just soft. By now, you've learnt to expect the unexpected. After all, this isn't a dinner. It's a spectacle. A slow-motion performance where every bite is a new plot twist. And every dish is as much a message as a meal, and nothing captures that better than the next round of courses where sweetness and salt meat and marmalade fruit and fish all show up hand in sticky perfumed hand. Welcome to the weirdly wonderful world of medieval sweet and savoury fusion. The first dish set before you looks innocent enough, a roasted trout golden and glistening. But then the scent hits cinnamon. A fine dusting of it over the skin accompanied by a dollop of preserved pear, and a sauce that's unmistakably made with honey. You blink. The fish smells like dessert. You take a bite. It's rich, soft and sweet in a way that defies every food instinct you've grown up with. And yet, it works. The sweetness isn't overwhelming. It's balancing. The pear cuts through the oil. The cinnamon lifts the whole thing like a breeze through heavy drapes. Historians still argue whether this was true preference or culinary performance. Were nobles actually craving honey-roasted pigeons and vinegar-spiced custards? Or were they performing their refinement, proving they could enjoy complicated flavours just as they could read Latin or breed greyhounds? You try not to think too hard as the next dish lands in front of you. A meat pie filled with minced lamb mint and dried dates. The crust is dusted with sugar. Yes, sugar. Not as decoration, but as a core component of flavour. And here's the thing. They're not doing this to be edgy or ironic. In this world, flavour is layered deliberately. Sweetness tempers heat. Fruit balances fat, and spice transforms everything. Take for example the chicken cooked with apricot paste and sprinkled with rosewater. It's not trying to taste like chicken, it's trying to taste like wealth worldliness and a silk pillow covered in gold dust. You take a bite. It's tender and juicy and tastes like no bird you've ever eaten, fruity, floral, and faintly mysterious. Another plate cabbage baked in sweet wine. Another quail wrapped in sugared grape leaves. Your taste buds, once sceptical, now lean forward eagerly. And always, always in between the petals. Not huge bouquets, not accidental garnishes, but carefully prepared purposeful bites. You nibble a candied marigold, orange and sharp, and lemony. It shocks the tongue awake after the heavy lamb pie. You crunch a sugared violet, and it makes the sweet wine cabbage taste like a dream instead of a dare. You begin to understand their logic. Nothing should dominate. No single flavour should stand unchallenged. Everything is about counterpoint, each dish playing off the one before and the one after, and the flower. It's not the finale, it's the bridge. You glance around the table. No one questions this. They've been trained in this style of eating the way someone trains for dance or chess. You see how they use the petals not just to refresh their breath or dazzle their neighbour, but to rebalance. You try it yourself. After a particularly rich bite of stewed duck with cherries, you pause and pick up a small rose petal dipped in honey and saffron. You let it dissolve on your tongue. The cherry recedes. The duck fades. Your palate is clear. The next dish arrives eel with fig jam and a crisp of almond sugar, and it tastes new, uncluttered, surprising. Petals as palate cleanser, petals as punctuation, petals as prep. And you start to notice the rhythm of it. Sweet, salty, spicy, floral. Repeat, like verses in a lullaby. Nothing gets stale. Nothing overwhelms. You're being fed like an instrument tuned gently with each bite. And yes, sometimes it goes too far. There's the cheese glazed in honey and wrapped in grape leaves, which tastes a bit like the dessert got lost and found itself in the dairy aisle. Or the veal balls in cinnamon syrup, which feel like they can't decide whether they're dinner or pie. But then comes a dish of poached pears on saffron rice with a candied mint leaf, and all is forgiven. It's delicate, warm, and slightly bitter. Perfect. You find yourself wondering how much of this you'd eat at home. Probably none. But here in this hall, at this table, with candles flickering and music drifting, it all makes sense. Because this isn't eating. It's curated dreaming. And the petals, they are the dream's thread. Another petal appears a sugar-dusted rosemary blossom on a spoon of mead jelly. It smells like pine and honey and tastes like memory. The kind of thing you'd expect to find at the edge of sleep. You're no longer questioning the rules. You're floating through them. You lean back again. The next course arrives. Something roasted. Something with cloves. But your mouth is still echoing with the whisper of a flower. By now you've eaten an unsettling amount of petals. More than a bouquet. Less than a garden. And it's not over yet. Because now comes the course, or rather the moment, where the petals aren't just accompaniments. They're the main event. A platter glides onto the table, carried with both hands by a servant so careful he looks like he's holding a baby made of crystal and expectations. The dish, a pyramid of candied rose petals glistening in the candlelight, stacked with theatrical precision. Between the layers, slivers of preserved ginger and little curls of spun sugar, so fine they shimmer like spiderwebs. You're essentially being asked to eat a centerpiece. You reach for one. It sticks slightly to your fingertips, soft but brittle. You press it to your tongue. It shatters quietly like sweet glass, then melts, leaving behind a perfume that is not taste so much as atmosphere. You feel as if you've just inhaled a garden, and also maybe learnt something about yourself. Across the table, a nobleman plucks 2 petals at once, and layers them with a bit of cheese. Bold, possibly blasphemous. You try it. It works. This is the candied petal moment, the part of the banquet that's not about surprise or contrast, but indulgence. Celebration. Repetition. It's a round of applause made edible. Historians still argue whether this was technically a course or just an extended flourish. Some manuscripts list it under interludes. Others call it a pause of elegance. A few just call it sweet meat of the flower, which frankly sounds like a love poem waiting to happen. You taste your next one, a deep crimson petalled chardonnay dusted with clove sugar. It's warmer than the others, richer, slightly spicy. It makes the previous course, some kind of veal custard, you think disappear completely. Another arrives a pale yellow petal rolled into a spiral and dipped in orange blossom syrup. It tastes like spring, like Sunday morning, like something a fairy might sell you at a questionable discount. And still they keep coming. Not just roses now, but violets, lavender. Even mint blossoms, each treated with the same care, brushed with egg white, dipped in sugar, left to dry, and arranged like edible confetti. You realise slowly that these petals are not about feeding you. They're about slowing you down. After the sweetness of meat and the intensity of spiced wine, this is a moment to pause to reset the tempo, to remember that eating can be delicate. Silly even, that not every dish has to prove itself. Some just have to be beautiful. A small dish appears in front of you, violet syrup served over finely crushed ice. Cold, fragrant, floral, to the point of absurdity. You sip it like a secret. It tastes purple. It tastes like a colour no one's invented yet. You glance around. No one is talking. Not really. The nobles have entered what you now think of as the petal trance. They chew slowly, smile faintly, dab at their lips with embroidered cloths, not to clean, but to punctuate. The servers, meanwhile, are like ghostly florists. More petals, more arrangements. A wreath of sugared marigolds draped around a mound of peach custard. A cluster of rose petals hiding a single candied almond. A violet blossom floating in a rosewater jelly. You reach for one wrapped around a sliver of candied lemon peel. It crunches like frost and finishes like perfume. This isn't dessert. Not yet. Dessert is coming, and it will likely involve pastry birds and a caramelized pear pretending to be a jeweled orb. But this is the breath between stanzas, the bridge between movements, the part of the song that isn't a chorus but still makes you feel something. And the beauty of it is, it doesn't need to justify itself. No protein, no starch, no complicated techniques, just a petal. A little sugar, a moment of quiet joy. You catch a servant whispering to another about how long the petals took to make. Apparently each one must be painted with sugar by hand, then dried in a warm room for 3 days. One sneeze and the whole batch is ruined. You look at the petal in your hand and suddenly feel reverent. You eat it slowly, carefully. Historians note that noble households often kept flower gardens, not for fragrance but for eating. Certain rose varietals, certain herbs, selected and pruned for the best candying shape, the softest texture. They were culinary crops grown for decadence. You wonder how many gardeners it took to keep one noblewoman in violet blossoms. How many hours someone spent drying mint petals just so a bored duke could nibble one between duck legs. A servant offers you a candied herb mix, rosemary, sage, lemon, verbena. It's sharper than the flowers more assertive. You chew slowly and realise they're preparing you for something heavier. Resetting your senses again, you smile. You're not just eating, you're being choreographed. You lean back, sip the last of your violet syrup, and let the next petal dissolve without chewing. No resistance, just surrender. Another dish is arriving. Something golden, possibly fig, but you're not ready for it yet. There's one last rose on your plate. You eat it, and everything else disappears. You've eaten flowers. You've eaten meats dressed as desserts, and herbs turned into tiny sugary chandeliers. But you haven't just been fed, you've been played. Because now you're starting to see it. Every dish, every scent, every rose petal has been sending a message. And the nobles around you, they're not just eating, they're reading, performing, responding. Food is communication, and this table is a conversation in colour and geometry. What lands in front of you next isn't even food. At first glance it looks like a sculpture, a pomegranate split open and filled with gold-flecked dates, each one impaled with a tiny clove. Around it are petal chips, crispy, sugared, violet leaves arranged in a perfect circle. You hesitate. It's too pretty, too exact. But this is the game. In noble dining presentation is not just about beauty. It's about symbolism, subtlety and status. That pomegranate. It's not just a fruit. It's fertility, power. Sometimes, if you're in Spain, even political alignment. The gold on the dates. Wealth, sure, but also purity. The violet chips, a sign of virtue. Or melancholy, depends who you're sitting next to. You take a bite, sweet, sharp, crunchy. It tastes like nothing and everything. And as you chew, you realise you've just answered someone. Across the table, a noble woman smiles faintly and lifts her spoon. She's been watching. You've passed the test. Historians still argue whether banquet presentation was truly coded or just decorative. But medieval manuals are clear dishes should reflect seasons' virtues, family crests, even political sentiments. One noble famously served his guests fish, moulded into the shape of his own face. Another dyed his pastries with the colours of his coat of arms. And the flowers, oh, they're loaded. Red roses for passion or piety. White ones for virginity or political neutrality. Violets for mourning or loyalty. Marigolds for boldness or a warning, depending on the placement. You suddenly look at your plate with new eyes. That sugar-dusted rose from earlier. It might have meant welcome. Or watch yourself. Hard to say. Next arrives a bowl of spiced milk custard, shaped like a dove. Not accidental. The dove is peace. You've seen it on tapestries. Now it's trembling slightly under a dusting of nutmeg. You spoon it delicately. It's cool, soft, and strangely calming. Alongside it, a tiny flower-stamped biscuit, its petals pressed into the dough before baking. You hold it up to the light and see the imprint rosemary, loyalty, or remembrance. This is more than garnish. It's more than flavour. It's language, quiet, edible language passed hand to hand. And some guess they speak it fluently. You watch a young noble place a single mint petal on his neighbour's plate. She blinks, then places a sugared clove bud beside his goblet. You're witnessing banquet flirtation, sugar-coated and herb-coated. You begin to play with your own petal pile, stacking a rose and a marigold with a hint of pear slice, and wondering if that translates to, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I like the jelly. And then someone places a lavender sugar spoon beside your dish. You glance up. A servant gives you a very small nod. You have no idea what it means, but you eat it anyway, because the other rule of noble dining, don't break the rhythm. You continue on another course, another rosewater glaze, another tiny petal balanced just so on a cube of candied apple. And the symmetry. Oh, the symmetry. Dishes are plated in triangles, squares, perfect spirals, colour palettes, shift from gold to purple to green, and then back again. A platter of sugar-dusted figs arrives shaped like a coat of arms. A tray of floral custards, rose, violet, elderflower, spelled out someone's initials earlier. You think, but the guests ate the S. Even the scents are coordinated. Remember that rosemary steam from earlier? It wasn't just for atmosphere. It was to prime your nose for the lamb crusted with fennel and sugar. That clove-scented napkin, It foreshadowed the cherry clove tart you didn't know was coming. This is not just food, it's architecture, it's choreography. And somewhere under all that rosewater and powdered almond is a power play so subtle it's practically invisible. You see it now. The man with the largest platter isn't the host. The woman with the gold-threaded serviette gets 2 petals per plate. The guest at the far end gets no flowers at all. You're somewhere in the middle. Not the brightest plate, not the simplest. A comfortable mystery. You eat your next sugared daisy with quiet confidence, because even if you don't speak the full dialect, you understand one thing clearly. Every petal has a purpose, and every bite tells a story. So you chew slowly, carefully, and when the next dish arrives, a violet tart with a single sugared mint leaf curved like a question mark, you smile. Because whatever it's asking, you're ready to answer. The first thing you notice before the next course even arrives is scent-sharp floral and musky swirling above the table in invisible plumes. Someone's thrown fresh rosemary on the fire again. A servant drifts past with a satchel of dried lavender, shaking it like confetti across the rushes. You catch a whisper of violet, then rose, then something darker. Maybe civet, or musk, or the breath of a fox that once wore a crown. You are sitting in a battlefield of perfume, because in a noble banquet smell is strategy. Your next petal, pale yellow, crisped with sugar, and dusted with crushed thyme, tastes like perfume. Not in a cloying way, but in a carefully controlled, this is what luxury smells like kind of way. You chew, and the flavour blooms in your nose. Around you, the nobles are sniffing more than chewing. You realise suddenly your nose is just as involved as your tongue. And that's not a side effect. That's the point. Historians still argue whether noble feasts used scent primarily for pleasure, for health, or for disguise. But the answer is likely all three. Smell in this setting is an extension of personality. A soft-spoken insult, a gentle flirtation, a medicinal blessing, or all three crushed into a sugar cube and placed between pigeon courses. You learn this the hard way when a dish of rose petal-wrapped cheese cubes arrives in front of you, each one sprinkled with something faintly bitter. You take a bite. It's sweet at first, then earthy, then uncomfortably intimate, like someone just whispered into your nose. You look up. A woman across the table raises an eyebrow. That petal, that spice. It wasn't random. Welcome to scented power plays. You begin to notice it everywhere. One noble's plates are dusted with violet sugar, common for status, but also a way to mark oneself as untouchably virtuous. Another's cloth napkin carries rosemary oil, historically thought to boost memory. He might be here to remind someone of a debt. A young lord wears a ring dipped in frankincense oil and accidentally brushes it against the arm of his neighbour with every bite. And then there's the musk. It's subtle but distinct. A kind of warmth in the air that doesn't belong to the food. Someone's wearing civet, or maybe ambergris. It's hard to say where it's coming from. Maybe nowhere. Maybe everyone. It's the olfactory version of a raised eyebrow suggestive without evidence. The petals, of course, participate fully in this war of smells. Some are sprayed with rosewater before being candied, creating a powdery sweetness that lingers in the mouth and rises behind the eyes. Others are infused with herbs, basil for boldness, mint for charm, sage for mystery. You eat one and taste not just the sugar, but the subtext and the air around you. It's been carefully designed. This isn't just nice-smelling food. It's curated scent architecture. The hearths burn specific woods, apple cherry, rosemary branches. The rushes beneath your feet are mixed with dried lavender and fennel. The wine is spiced not just for flavour but to perfume the breath. You realise you're not breathing air, you're breathing intention. At one point, a servant walks by with a basket of hot stones drizzled in flower oils, letting the scent rise and drift like incense. Your eyes water slightly. No one else reacts. And then there's the spiced hand wash, offered between courses, warm water steeped with lemon balm, rose hips, and a touch of clove. You dip your fingers in and are handed a towel that smells like cinnamon and memory. Even the candle smoke participates. Someone somewhere is burning dried petals alongside the tallow. It smells like grief made palatable. Or maybe just like nostalgia for something you never lived. Historians note that scent at noble tables often served to cover up less pleasant realities, like smoke sweat or slightly suspect meat. But in these refined halls it goes beyond utility. It becomes etiquette, manipulation, emotional strategy. You start to imagine what scent combinations would say about you if you were the host. Rose for charm, basil for bravery, a hint of nutmeg for mystery. Maybe. Or maybe you'd lean into the unexpected. Lavender and black pepper. Candied sage and citrus blossom. Something that says, I see the world sideways and serve my almonds with intent. Your next petal is a sugared carnation, bright pink and unexpectedly peppery. It's aggressive. You weren't ready. It demands attention. You catch someone watching your reaction. You raise your glass in silent acknowledgement. They smile. You have entered the silent duel of floral diplomacy. A tart arrives almond and fig in a rose-scented crust. You chew slowly. The crust melts. The fig stays. The rose lingers in the back of your throat like a whispered compliment. Another dish, a custard, infused with orange flower and thyme. It tastes like a garden hiding a secret. And between each course, as always, a petal. Sometimes sharp, sometimes soft, always fragrant. You begin to smell them before you taste them. You begin to know who sent them. You are no longer just eating. You are navigating. And the path is marked not by breadcrumbs, but by the scent of sugar flower and intent. You let the next petal rest on your tongue without chewing. You inhale. You smile. You are not lost. You are exactly where they want you to be. Somewhere between your 5th goblet of spiced wine and your 8th edible flower, it dawns on you. You're not just at dinner. You're at an exhibition, a declaration, a flex, and the strongest flex of all spices. Specifically, spices that didn't belong here. Spices that came from thousands of miles away. Spices that required sailors, traders, dangerous deals, and sometimes entire wars just to end up on this plate in front of you. And yes, that includes the petals. Because these candied rose petals you're crunching now, they're not just pretty. They're not just fragrant. They're global. The next one placed in front of you has been dusted with cardamom and dipped in honey. You taste it floral at first, then bright and citrusy, then spicy. You blink. It's almost modern. Almost like a bite of perfume that turned into a poem halfway down your throat. Historians often describe noble feasting as a type of edible theatre, and nothing performed quite like imported ingredients. Sugar, clove, cinnamon, nutmeg, saffron. These were not pantry staples. These were treasure. To use them was to whisper, "Look how far my money can travel," and flowers. They joined the party as local messengers wearing foreign gowns. Roses from England, yes, but now glazed in cane sugar from Cyprus, dusted with cinnamon from Ceylon. Maybe even served atop rice paper from Moorish Spain. You bite into a petal, rolled in a paste of ginger and almond. The almond is local. The ginger came by ship. Took a year. Might have cost someone's estate. It's a luxury that dissolves in your mouth in 6 seconds. Someone across the table eats a clove-studded violet. Clove trees only grow in a few tropical pockets. You look at the petals, so soft, so fragile, and imagine its seasoning sailing across oceans sealed in wax, guarded like a relic. This is more than cuisine. This is a scented power statement. A dish that says, I can make flowers taste like money. Another bite arrives quince jam on a lavender blossom topped with crushed pistachios and a mist of rosewater. It smells like trade winds. It tastes like a treaty between sweet and strange. And beneath it all, a quiet tension. Because these spices, they're not just rare, they're political. To possess them is to signal connection to the east, to the south, to ports and deals and dynasties you may never see. Some scholars debate whether nobles actually appreciated the flavour of these spices, or just what they represented. After all, cardamom can confuse the medieval palate. Saffron is subtle, but wildly expensive. But in a world where appearances often trumped appetite, perhaps taste was just the delivery system for wealth. The petal you eat now is marigold dipped in clove syrup. It starts sweet ends sharp. Your tongue tingles. Your brain wonders whether anyone's watching you react. They are. The noble across from you smiles faintly. She just finished a bite of rose and sugar dumpling filled with dates and cinnamon. She doesn't look satisfied, she looks triumphant. The servers arrive with spice plates, small flat dishes of ginger wafers, sugar almonds, and flour candies rolled in saffron. They're passed slowly, almost reverently. You pick a violet blossom rubbed with nutmeg. It tastes like sunshine, filtered through velvet curtains. Even the wine has joined the game. One goblet is heavy with spiced claret, the next scented with clove-infused rosewater. You sip. It warms your throat and makes the room seem just slightly golden. Around you the nobles begin to lean back a little. Not because they're full heavens no, but because they've made their point. The message has landed, I can afford to eat scent. I can chew commerce. I can nibble on the Silk Road. And then, as if to emphasise the absurdity of it all, a single sugared rose petal is delivered to your plate on a square of gilded parchment. No explanation, just presentation. You eat it. It tastes like diplomacy sweetened with ego. Somewhere nearby, a lute begins a soft tune. The melody wanders. You breathe in and smell cinnamon again, but this time not from food. From the floor rushes where dried orange peel and crushed bark were scattered earlier, now warming underfoot, releasing their scent as the air cools. Even the room is seasoned. The next course, a syrup of black pepper and honey drizzled over toasted bread and decorated with petals preserved in sugar and fig jam. The bread is sweet, the pepper bites, the flour. It bridges the two with a soft, scented truce. This is a dance of contrasts, earth and air, bitter and silk, the nose and the exotic. You eat slowly now, not from weariness, but from awe. Each bite is someone else's voyage, someone else's risk, someone else's luxury distilled into a spoonful of petal and spice. And it all ends here, quietly in your mouth. One last rose is passed around. It's been steeped in cardamom and orange flower, its edges curled like the cover of an old book. You bite. It tastes like a secret told by candlelight. It tastes like money whispered through petals. At this point in the feast, your senses have been perfumed, spiced, sweetened, and softened into something very close to surrender. You've chewed petals dipped in history, drank wines steeped in empire, and breathed more cinnamon than a modern bakery in December. So it surprises you not at all when a servant leans in with a small silver tray and murmurs, "For your humours, my lord." You glance down. More petals. But this time they're not just beautiful. They're medicine. Because in the medieval noble mind, the line between food and healing was thin, and in a banquet like this, that meant certain dishes, especially the delicate ones, served between or after courses, were meant not just to dazzle your taste buds, but to balance your body. You're handed a candied borage flower wrapped around a nugget of sugar and violet oil. To lift melancholy, the servant adds, as if you weren't already emotionally airborne from the quince tart. You chew. It tastes slightly of cucumber and garden dust, but there's a cooling softness to it, almost like drinking cold water after a long nap. Historians still argue how much faith medieval diners truly placed in these cures. Some saw them as sincere attempts to counter the chaos of multi-course feasting. Others as elegant excuses to keep eating sugar, while pretending it was responsible behaviour. Either way, the logic was sound, medievally speaking. You are made up of 4 humours: blood, phlegm, black bile and yellow bile, and food. Like everything else stirs them. Too much roast goose, that's a hot and wet dish. Counter it with something dry and cool. Enter candied petals. Your next bite is a rose petal brushed with lemon balm syrup, wrapped delicately around a candied almond. For clarity, says a nearby noblewoman. You nod. Sure. Your humours feel marginally clarified. A servant offers you a lavender-stuffed sugar ball, explaining it soothes the stomach and lightens the head. You pop it into your mouth. It fizzes faintly on your tongue and leaves behind a memory of spring air. Then comes a dish labelled Syrupus Rosarum. Rose syrup mixed with ground poppy seeds poured over warm custard. It slides down like velvet and makes your eyelids heavier in the best way. You catch a nobleman near the high table, adjusting his robes and requesting a second spoonful. My digestion is notoriously fragile, he declares. You notice his wine goblet is never empty. Next up, angelica root comfit, candied with fennel, and dusted with powdered sage. You chew it slowly, and it tastes like licorice had a herbal awakening. Good for wind, someone mutters. You pretend not to hear. Another guest requests a marigold petal folded around candied aniseed to settle the bile after too much lamb. Someone else sucks gently on a petal soaked in mint vinegar, swearing it clears the brain. You find a violet tucked beside your plate, shaped into a tiny twist with a pearl of honey inside. Heart tonic, the server whispers. You place it gently on your tongue. It doesn't just melt, it vanishes. And now you see it clearly, these aren't just snacks. They're rituals. Each one a little offering to your body. A bargaining chip. A thank you note to your stomach for enduring roast duck with strawberry paste and garlic custard. A peace treaty between your gallbladder and your ego. Another server passes around tiny cups of rose vinegar, cooled and cut with a bit of sugar. You sip. It's sharp, startling, but oddly effective. Your belly feels less like a battlefield, more like a softly humming distillery of strange joy. There's a moment of quiet now. You sit back watching the steam rise from another round of candied fennel petals being arranged on a dish shaped like a blooming lily. Your head tilts to one side. You could sleep here. You could dream entirely in edible flowers. One noble beside you mumbles, "I don't even like sweets," as he spoons up a rose custard laced with saffron and almond milk. "It's just medicinal," he adds. Everyone nods with great seriousness. A small packet of dried violets and mint, bound with waxed thread, is pressed into your hand. "To chew later," says the page. "For after-feast humours." Even your breath, it seems, is being managed. You are drifting now not from fullness but from balance. These tiny interventions, petal by petal sugar, crystal by sugar crystal, are not about flavour anymore. They're about settling the stomach, the senses, the mind. One last treat comes your way, a soft fig stuffed with rose paste, and thyme blossom tied with a sliver of candied orange peel. It's warm, melting, utterly unnecessary, perfectly essential. You eat it slowly. You don't talk. You barely move. Because you've reached the part of the meal where food no longer feeds you. It restores you. And the petal on your plate, just one left now, seems to pulse with intention. You pick it up. You chew. And your humours. For the moment at least, perfectly aligned. At this stage in the feast, you've lost track of time. Not in the, oh wow, where did the hours go sense, but in the I have transcended clock-based existence, and now float gently between courses kind of way. And yet, amid all the sensory overwhelm, a subtle pattern begins to emerge, something almost secret in its simplicity. It happens between the courses in the lull, in the space. When the plates are cleared, the air cools and the music grows soft enough to resemble silence. These are the interludes. Not for chewing, not for talking, just for being. A servant appears at your side, with a tiny bowl of candied petals and fennel seeds and no words. You take one, a sugar-dusted violet, and let it rest on your tongue. You don't chew. You don't sip your wine. You just sit. This isn't a mistake, it's designed. The nobles have always understood the value of the pause, especially in a world where time is luxury, and eating is an exercise in measured delight. Historians call these moments intercourse pauses, or more poetically silent sweetenings. You're not just waiting, you're letting the flavours settle, the stomach shift, the mind reboot. A low note from a lute sounds in the distance, then fades. A breeze from a narrow window stirs the scent of mint and roast almond in the air. You breathe deeper without realising it. Another dish arrives, but it's not food, it's a cloth. Infused with rosewater and lemon peel, gently warmed, folded, and placed in your hands. You hold it for a moment, like it's a newborn bird, and when you raise it to your face, the scent fills you like incense. Not sharp, not showy, just enough to mark this exact moment in your body. You wipe your fingers, your lips, your thoughts. This isn't about hygiene. It's about transition. From one flavour to the next. From one emotional state to another. The interludes come in many forms. A servant passes around tiny rose vinegar dipped wafers meant to quiet the blood. A noblewoman lays down her spoon and closes her eyes briefly, as if the sugared thyme she just consumed was a lullaby. You sip a warm cordial of pear and mint, and the effect is instant. Your chest loosens. You can feel the wine retreating slightly, the spice fading. It's like someone just opened a window in your ribcage. These in-between moments also serve another purpose observation. You notice for the first time how many eyes are watching. Not in malice, not in judgment, but in curiosity. A glance here, a small smile there. Banquets aren't just about eating, they're about placement, posture, pacing. You catch someone across the table, delicately peeling a violet petal from her tart and tucking it beneath her napkin. Not to discard it, but to save it. As a token, a keepsake, a fragrant footnote. You start to notice petals appearing without fanfare, resting atop the next plate, before the dish arrives, folded into the corners of a linen roll, tucked delicately into your wine napkin. Each one a whisper of pause. One servant offers a small bowl of crushed candied rose hips, mixed with slivered almonds. To stir the appetite, he says. You think he means the next appetite, the one you'll need to summon after all this indulgence. You oblige. It tastes faintly of autumn and syrup and tired sweetness. Then a change. The candles are trimmed. The light dims slightly. And now another kind of interlude begins the walk. Some nobles rise. Not to leave, but to stroll. Softly, gracefully, like ghosts in brocade, they walk the perimeter of the hall, nodding to others, breathing deeply, holding goblets loosely like lanterns. You're not required to follow, but you do. You stand, and your limbs surprise you by still existing. The floor feels solid, your body full fragrant and just slightly too buoyant. You pass a tapestry you hadn't noticed before a feast scene embroidered in velvet and thread of gold. There are flowers there too. A rose in one goblet. A violet resting on a duchess's lip. You realise these interludes aren't optional. They're the secret structure of the entire evening. They frame the meal. They give space for memory to form. You return to your seat and find a single candied rosemary blossom has been placed on your plate. It is cool. It is sweet. It is your reset button. You eat it without thought and immediately forget the last dish. Not because it was unworthy, but because the rosemary is the new page. It's not just food that defines the banquet. It's the stillness between courses. The rosewater cloth. The mint cordial. The petal you never expected. And the sigh you release as the lute plays again and your plate is cleared one more time. You've noticed it by now. This isn't a meal with an endpoint. It's a gently meandering journey through mood, texture, colour, scent, and the slow calibration of your entire inner world. And here in the soft core of the banquet, you encounter the most elusive course of all emotion. Because the next dish set in front of you isn't about flavour, it's about feeling. A soft spoonful of clotted cream steeped in orange blossom water, with a single candied petal pressed delicately on top. It's so subtle, so light, it barely registers on your tongue. But it opens something, like a window being cracked at the back of your chest. This is what the medieval thinkers might call mood engineering, not in the clinical sense, but in the poetic, in the magical. Petals weren't just eaten for show, or sweetness, or even digestion. They were tools to gently coax the soul into new states. A rose petal to stir affection. A violet to inspire melancholy. A marigold to bolster courage. Historians still argue whether this practice was symbolic or sincerely believed to shift the spirit. But for those living in a world that blurred magic medicine and theology, why not all three? You chew the next bite, a tiny tartlet filled with sugared anise and topped with a lavender blossom. The flavour is barely there, but the scent, it lingers. Calm, clear, faintly herbal, it wraps itself around your temples like a soft cloth. You feel your breath lengthen. And suddenly, the room seems quieter. The harpist leans into slower notes. The murmur of conversation becomes a lull. Another flower arrives, a jasmine petal resting on a chilled spoonful of almond milk jelly. It's so pale, you almost don't see it. You eat it in one bite and feel something gentle sweep across your mind, like a breeze through heavy curtains. You glance around. Others are experiencing it too. One nobleman closes his eyes, his fingers tracing the embroidery on the tablecloth. A young woman leans her chin on her hand, not out of boredom, but out of settlement. Everyone here is falling softly inward. A new serving is placed before you, minted rose compote, slow cooked with sugar, and crushed violet candy formed into a delicate quenelle that's almost too pretty to eat. You do anyway. The taste is vague, like memories from a warm bath, but the effect is immediate. Your shoulders drop. Your spine lengthens. You are melting into your chair. The servants know this part. They don't hurry. They don't clatter. Plates arrive in silence. Petals are placed gently, never tossed, never rushed. They understand that at this point every bite is a thread pulling you deeper into softness. And oh, the mood-specific petals. You're offered a bowl of sugared lily petals, which supposedly quiet the nerves. You try one, and find yourself suddenly more open to the idea of staring at nothing for several minutes. You're handed a cup of infused water, flavoured with hibiscus and lemon verbena, cooled and scented and allegedly good for gladdening the spirit. It does. A soft wafer of candied rose geranium follows a petal you've never tasted before. It's minty perfumed strange, and yet it aligns perfectly with the low music and the flicker of torchlight against polished goblets. Someone near you gently hums. It's not a song, it's just contentment escaping. This part of the banquet isn't a course. It's a mood bath, a palate cleanse for your nervous system. And the petals, those soft, crystallized little nothings, are doing exactly what they were born to do: quiet the world. A dish arrives you weren't expecting: scented rice, soaked in rose and almond milk, scattered with flecks of gold leaf, and a single sugared mint flower. It doesn't feel like a statement. It feels like a lullaby. You eat slowly, your spoon tracing lazy arcs. Each bite blends into the next, like watercolour. No sharp edges, no drama, just warmth, scent, and peace. And just when you think this part might be done, someone brings you a soft square of pressed marigold candy, slightly bitter, and entirely comforting. You chew, you swallow, and you realise you're not tired, you're tranquil. This is the genius of the flower course. Not to fill you, not to impress you, but to change your state. To move you from the sharp performative edges of hunger and pride into a place of open-hearted stillness. The petal in front of you now is no longer a curiosity. It's a friend, a message, a hush. You eat it slowly, eyes half closed, the harp gently plucking, in the distance the room softening like old velvet, and in your mind a voice as quiet as rosewater whispers, there is nothing you need to do. Just breathe, just chew, just drift. The hush of the petal trance still lingers as a new kind of movement returns to the room. Not the clang of spoons or the bustle of servers, no, this is softer, more delicate, more deliberate. People begin to notice, without speaking, that something is shifting. You sit up a little straighter. You become aware again of who's sitting near you, of glances exchanged, of little smiles notched into the corners of mouths. You've entered the most socially coded part of the banquet, the etiquette of petals. Because here, more than any other course, what flower you're served and how you eat it says everything about who you are, or at least who someone wants you to appear to be. A servant appears at your elbow with a small crystal plate. On it, a sugared white rose petal shaped into a crescent, lightly brushed with lemon oil. You glance up. The lady across from you is watching. Her own plate carries a deep red petal dusted in cinnamon. This is a message. You're not sure what it says, but you can feel it humming like a second language behind the polite silence. Historians refer to these as flower signals, a kind of unspoken code between guests during the most formal phase of noble dining. Different flowers, different colours, different pairings, all carried subtext, suggestion, sometimes even flirtation. Violet petals, usually reserved for widows or those playing the part. Marigold courage, or a public nudge toward honesty. Rosemary remembrance. Sometimes forgiveness. Rose always love, but what kind? That's where it gets complicated. You eat your white petal slowly. It's floral soft, touched with sour. You don't break eye contact with the woman across from you. She smiles faintly, then turns away. You've replied. Next comes a violet blossom dipped in mead jelly, and this one isn't sent by a person, it's served to everyone. A neutral gesture. But even how you handle it matters. Do you bite it all at once, nibble it at the edges, tuck it under your bread? As if you didn't notice, every act is part of the dance. You see a man quietly leave his rosemary petal untouched. The woman next to him picks it up and places it on her napkin. There's a story there. You don't ask. Your next offering is a lavender crystal, a blossom dipped in sugar, hardened into candy, and placed delicately atop a sliver of pear. You chew slowly. The floral bite follows the fruit like memory chasing a dream. A noble to your left sneezes and drops his mint blossom. The lady beside him lifts hers toward him with the grace of someone delivering a pardon. Everyone pretends not to notice, but the gesture is noted by all. These aren't just manners, they're manoeuvres. A raised spoon with a petal is an offer. A petal placed near a goblet is an invitation. One slipped into a napkin and returned a private refusal, or a promise. And then there are the servants' choices, because not every petal is requested. Some are assigned, placed quietly, decided in the kitchen or higher. A guest of ambiguous rank receives a marigold stuffed with candied fennel assertive, bold a push into visibility. A quiet older woman gets a sprig of sugared thyme, bittersweet and subtle. You're starting to read the room like a bouquet. You take a breath. You've just been handed a tiny tart filled with almond paste and topped with a violet heart. It's beautiful, intimate, possibly political. You eat it carefully. Then comes a moment of real theatre. A footman approaches, carrying a tray of petal boxes, each labelled by name. One is set before you. Inside a rose petal, glazed with pear syrup, and wrapped around a sliver of saffron-dusted plum. The box itself smells of cinnamon. No one explains this. It is simply your flower, your message, your role in the ongoing play. You eat it like a confession, soft, sweet, a little strange. And once again you're reminded this part of the feast has nothing to do with hunger. It's about performance, about identity, about who you are while you're being watched and how gracefully you choose symbolism into silence. Nearby a noblewoman laughs gently over a lavender and honey biscuit offered by her suitor. Her cheeks flush not from wine, but from being seen. Across from you, someone has arranged their leftover petals into a tiny design, a heart, maybe, or a warning, or an apology. There's a language here, and while you don't speak it fluently, you can feel its cadence. So when your next plate arrives a simple, pale rose petal, dusted with mint sugar, you lift it, pause and meet the gaze of the one who sent it. Then eat it slowly. A little smile, a lot said, nothing spoken, and the room hushed once more exhales. The candles have burned down to gentle golden stubs. The light feels warmer now, as if the air itself is sighing. The feast hasn't ended, but it's turning inward, softening around the edges, like parchment left in the sun. And into this tender twilight comes something unexpectedly electric. Flirting, no, not the bawdy kind, not raucous toasts or scandalous glances from behind feathered fans. This is courtly love, all hushed symbols and sugared petals and the long game. And nowhere is it more quietly passionate than in the food. Because now every rose petal served or not served carries meaning layered in sweetness and silence. The nobleman to your left has just received a dark, red, candied rose placed dramatically atop a folded napkin. He doesn't touch it. He simply lets it sit there, a message unopened, the floral equivalent of a letter with no return address. Across from him, the young noblewoman who's been playing with her wine stem all evening. She receives a petal-stuffed biscuit wrapped in a thin ribbon of mint. She doesn't eat it. She places it in her sleeve. You feel like you're watching a love story being written one sugar crystal at a time. And now a plate is placed in front of you. It holds a sliver of quince, a sugared violet, a single pink rose petal resting delicately on both. You pause. This isn't just a snack. It's a sentence. You chew it slowly first, the quince soft, sour, sweet, then the violet, cool, floral, then the rose light, familiar, deeply symbolic. Together they taste like longing filtered through etiquette. Historians describe this period of noble dining as a theatre of restraint where true feelings had to be shaped into gesture poetry, or in this case, edible metaphors. A sugared rose could be an invitation. A marigold could be a challenge. A missing petal might sting worse than a slap. The candied flower course, especially toward the end of a banquet, often doubled as an emotional playing field. Who receives what? From whom? And how do they respond? One court record from the 14th century describes a feast where a duke sent his suitor 5 petals, 3 roses, 1 violet, 1 sage blossom, each chosen deliberately. She replied with a single sugared thyme sprig. Historians have debated the meaning ever since. Tonight you're living it. Your next dish is a pear tartlet topped with twin rose petals, pink and white intertwined. They've been glazed with a syrup that smells faintly of orange flower and mead. You don't know who it's from. You eat it anyway. It's sweet, sentimental, and slightly intoxicating. Someone notices. Moments later you're handed a mint sugar pearl wrapped in a curled violet petal. A classic reply. Polite, cool, thoughtful. You place it on your tongue and do not speak. Across the hall, 2 guests begin passing petals directly no more trays. A rosemary sprig exchanged for a candied marigold. A sugared daisy left discreetly on a spoon. Eyes meet. Hands pause. Everyone else pretends not to notice. You realise this isn't new. The seeds were planted earlier, during the interludes, the glances, the way one person lingered near another's dish. But now the flowers are blooming. Boldly, quietly, a dish of rose custard hearts is passed. You receive one. It's been drizzled with violet syrup and dusted with crushed almond. It's soft and warm and tender. It tastes like affection dressed as dessert. You savour it too slowly, and a passing server notices. He places a second one beside your plate with no explanation. You understand. Someone saw. The flute music shifts. A slightly brighter melody, not festive exactly more, hopeful. Another guest stands, crosses the room, and offers a crystallized lily to someone seated far away. No words, just a slight bow. The room watches. The recipient accepts. A murmur of amusement, of admiration. You wonder if this will be written down later, like in the old court records. A petal's journey from one side of the table to the other, preserved in velvet gossip for generations. The next flower you eat is a white rose rolled in cinnamon sugar, sharp and tender, like love carried too long. It reminds you that not every gesture lands. Not every sweetness is returned. You notice an untouched plate of petal candies near one nobleman. He hasn't eaten any. A silent refusal. His neighbours shift in their seats, discreetly adjusting their own flowers. Not all petals are for joy. Some are delicate rejections. Still, you can feel the warmth beneath it all. The banter woven through edible tokens. The games played in sugar and scent, and etiquette so precise it borders on poetry. A servant brings one final petal, a candied pink rose split gently down the centre, with a twist of lemon peel folded between. It's not the flashiest flower of the night, but something about it feels deliberate, considered, soft. You eat it slowly, thoughtfully, and maybe, just maybe, someone across the room smiles. You're full now, not just in the stomach, but everywhere, your limbs heavy with sweetness, your mouth softened by floral residue, your mind floating somewhere between candlelight and cardamom. And yet there's still one more transition to witness the end of the age of edible elegance, because you're tasting the twilight of the petal feast. Your latest bite, a delicate apple slice topped with sugared rosemary, is delicious, yes. But it carries a trace of something else, a kind of sadness, as if the dish knows it's part of a fading tradition. because these long, perfumed banquets, they don't last. Historians point to the late 15th century as the beginning of the end. Tastes shifted, ideas sharpened. The Renaissance brought new philosophies, new aesthetics. And the petal, once a centerpiece of refined dining, began to be seen as decorative, unnecessary. Your next bite is a subtle echo of the earlier courses, a small square of rose petal jelly trembling slightly on a silver spoon. The texture is perfect, the flavour is familiar, but it's quieter than before, almost ghostly. People began to favour clearer divisions between sweet and savoury. Sugar was moved to the end of the meal. Dishes became less about symbolism, more about anatomy, precision, clarity. The concept of eating a flower between bites of meat became old-fashioned, frivolous, even childish to some. You wonder briefly how something once so powerful, so coded, so poetic, could vanish into footnotes and decorative garnishes. The next petal on your plate is lavender, pressed flat, and sugared like a postage stamp. You eat it slowly, as if in tribute. Its scent is faint, its flavour fleeting. You think back to earlier in the night, how a single petal once said everything, how you paused between bites, just to let a sugared violet reset your soul. Now it's all starting to feel ceremonial. An echo, a memory wrapped in marzipan. The servers are quieter too, the dishes smaller, the sugar less frequent. It's as if the kitchen knows the petal is stepping aside. Some say it was inevitable. As global trade expanded, flavours diversified, chocolate arrived, coffee arrived. Tomatoes, eventually. The world grew louder, brighter, bolder. The subtle elegance of flower speak began to wilt. Still there are holdouts. Your next course, a fig custard, topped with candied rose and cardamom, is pure nostalgia. A dish clinging to a time when food was as much letter as sustenance. And someone at the table knows it. The nobleman to your right takes a bite size and says softly, "They used to serve these with poems. You don't ask what kind. You already know. You've been tasting poems all night." The final few bites arrive quickly now. A sugar-glazed violet cracker, a marigold cordial, a rosemary nougat wrapped in pear skin. Each one lighter than the last. Each one whispering goodbye. You notice the youngest diners are starting to fidget. Their plates are covered in crumbs of forgotten petals. They're ready for pastry birds and sugar sculptures, for the new age of dessert. You finish a final candied mint petal, barely a bite. Its flavour fades almost immediately. The candlelight flickers lower. The air grows cooler. Someone coughs softly. A chair shifts. You realise the flower feast, this specific, deliberate, perfumed ritual of edible mood-coded love and sugared pauses is ending. Not just tonight, but in history. And it won't be back. There will be echoes, petals in wedding cakes, violet syrups in fancy cocktails, rosewater macarons. But the language of flowers, the way you once held a sugared sage leaf like a secret, is slipping away. Still you were here, you saw it, you tasted it, and now, as the final dish arrives, a thin biscuit, layered with rose petal jam, and decorated with a tiny sprig of candied thyme, you know what it means. Not a message, not a flirtation, just a curtain call. A final petal placed with care. You eat it slowly, letting every sugar crystal dissolve on your tongue. And as the servers begin to clear, and the musicians gently silence their strings, you feel a softness settle in your chest. Because the petal feast may be over, but its flavour lingers. The feast is almost over. The last chords of the harp dissolve like sugar on your tongue, and the candles lean low pools of golden wax, collecting like the remnants of dreams. The servers move with reverence now. No rush, no clatter, just gentle rituals. A folded cloth here, a wiped rim there. It feels less like a dinner ending and more like a temple closing for the night. Before you, a final plate, nothing elaborate, no tower of pastry, no mosaic of candied violets, no gold leaf clinging to rose jelly. Just a small, soft cushion of almond milk custard, barely quivering, crowned with a single rose petal. It is the most quiet dish of the night. And somehow, the most powerful. The petal has been candied lightly, just enough to catch the flicker of flame and the faint glisten of sugar. Its edges curl slightly perfect but not symmetrical. Its centre fades from deep pink to the barest touch of white. You don't reach for it right away. You just look at it, because after everything, after the symbol-laced petals, the lavender lullabies, the saffron-dusted sighs, you understand this one completely. This petal is not a code. It is a farewell. You pick up your spoon. The custard yields easily, and the petal folds softly into it, like a curtain being drawn. You take the bite. It is warm. It is cool. It is not quite sweet. It is perfect. This final moment isn't about richness or surprise. It's not a finale meant to dazzle. It's a descent. A soft return from the peaks of spice and scent phantom performance. A signal that it's time to return to yourself. The hall reflects that. The nobles recline slightly now, eyes gentler, postures looser. The flirtations have quieted. The etiquette has loosened its corset. Even the servers seem slower, smiling faintly as they offer final cordial sips, rose hip and plum or mead laced with violet. Someone passes you a bowl of dried petals, unglazed, unsweetened. They crumble between your fingers like old paper. You don't eat them. You inhale gently. They smell like everything you've eaten and everything that came before it. A single servant walks the length of the table, carrying a silver tray lined with tiny cloth pouches tied with wax string. Inside each one, a few candied flower fragments tucked carefully for guests to take home. You receive yours. It's warm from her hand. Another tradition. Another pause. Another soft full stop at the end of a sentence made of sugar and scent. You tuck it into your sleeve. The musicians pack their strings. The guests rise slowly. Chairs scrape quietly like sighs, and you, still seated, sip the last of your cordial and think back on the strange, fragrant journey you've just taken. From the first rose petal to the last custard. From lavender calm to marigold flirtation. From codified etiquette to silent intimacy. You came expecting food. You leave having tasted language theatre, medicine, poetry, memory, ritual. And petals. So many petals. One last dish is placed before you. Not food this time. A napkin folded into the shape of a rose. Inside a final petal. Not sugared, not glazed, just dried. You take it between your fingers. And you smile, because you understand what it means. The feast is over. But the memory, it stays with you. Soft, sweet, slightly fragrant. Like a rose crushed between the pages of a book you loved once. You rise your satchel light with flower sugar and dreams. And behind you the hall slowly dims. The petal has fallen. And so has the night. And now let it all slip away. The hall behind you grows quiet, its last candle winking out like a tired eye. The scent of rose still lingers, faint like memory. But the sweetness has softened. The spices have faded, and even the petals once sharp and sugared have turned to echoes. You feel the warmth of the feast in your chest. Not heavy, not sharp, just gentle. Comforting. Like something still blooming long after the flower has fallen. Your hands are clean. Your breath is calm. Your belly content. There is no more need to decode each bite, No more glances to interpret, no more petals to chew. Only stillness, only you. The world around you is quieter now. Your limbs are slower, your breath deeper. The night has gathered you gently into its arms, and even the thoughts in your head have begun to drift soft like flower confetti on a breeze. Let them go. Let the warmth of almond and mint, of violets and cardamom linger just behind your eyes.